Hello and welcome to the SuperShow podcast. I am Alex Jones and today joining me is the one and only Jamie. Hello,
Woohoo! Jamie. Hello, that might be the first time I've ever done finger guns at the camera and I'm kind of regretting it. I should have done the sound effects, you're right, that's what I was missing.
I like finger guns and I like it when people do the thing and they say, who's got two thumbs and doesn't give a fuck? This guy.
Who's got two thumbs but one of them's up his arse? This guy. For anyone that doesn't have the audio or the video version of this podcast, I pointed at myself with one thumb, the implication being the other is up my arse as we're recording. But it's not.
Lovely.
Here it is.
Jamie,
Proof.
I've got a question for you.
Yeah?
Who have got four thumbs and are about to talk about whole lot of games?
Oh, is it Alex Jones and Jamie McCulloch, the two most premier video game discussers on planet Earth?
It would be, but you didn't get your thumbs out, so...
Oh, shit, I forgot the thumbs. Just two people, two thumbs. We'll share.
We can share thumbs, there you go. This is quite sort of a one-off for us because we've already sat here and talked for 2 hours out there in podcast land. Jamie and I just sat through Summer Game Fest, the opening night that Geoff Keighly himself was hosting in some lovely shoes and a shiny jacket, because we're recording this on the 9th, on the Thursday, and so we have sat through 2 hours of reveals of some things that we already knew were coming out, but we got to see some more of them, some announcements, some leaks. There was a couple of leaks that dropped just before the show that were then confirmed, but also some leaks that were not confirmed, which we'll get onto as well. We're not only going to talk about Summer Game Fest, we're also, hopefully, if we get onto it, if we don't talk about that for too long, going to talk about the reaction to the Sonic Frontiers game demo that we sort of got to see the other day, some Diablo Immortal news, news about E3 and its return properly in 2023 when people will be able to go there. It won't just be a digital event. Some Hideo Kojima news. Everyone is always psyched for that. And also, possibly, we might get onto something about God of War Ragnarok.
It's ambitious, I'll admit it.
It's ambitious. I was going to keep going and I thought, this is punchy.
I reckon, tell me how you feel about this. We'll see how much our eyes are closing on their own by the time we hit the 2 hour mark. And if it's like more than 60% shut, involuntary, like then maybe we call it a day. Or a night.
Hard cut.
Yeah.
So if we don't make it to those news stories, I do apologise. We will placate you some other way. And one other way you could see some more about those news stories is to join our Patreon, because we do have a Patreon over at patreon.com/supershow, where you can go there and you can see more content. You can speak to us in the Discord and you can say to us, what did you leave out of the podcast when you got to 2 hours? And we could let you know in person. Yeah. And it's only $2 on the Discord, so why wouldn't you do it? We're obviously right now on the platform that you're listening / watching us on, be YouTube or podcasting platforms. But if you are on the other one, then you could go and listen to us / watch us on the other one, because we're on YouTube in video and podcasting platforms. I'm talking Spotify, iTunes, Google Podcasts, all of the big podcasting platforms. We're also on Paisley Radio at paisleyradio.com. We go live there Thursdays at 10 p.m, repeated on Mondays at 10 p.m. So really you have no excuse for not spending a couple of hours with Jamie and I in the week. Why not go to bed, put your headphones in, put one of those mediums on, and just listen to the Super Show podcast? You can listen to our soothing sounds.
That honestly sounds so relaxing that I wish I could do it right now, but I have an obligation to be here and contribute to the recording of those soothing sounds, so I'm going to have to pass for now.
Indeed you will, Jamie. So before we get on to the gaming news, how about I give you a cheeky little comment of the week?
Oh, please do.
This one comes in from One Tit Wonder, who is singing your praises, Jamie, because on the back of the PlayStation showcase that we watched last Thursday, One Tit Wonder said, wow, Jamie predicted both Final Fantasy 16 and Resident Evil 4 Remake. Maybe you really do have insiders behind you. What say you, sir? How are you in the know?
I have to answer this very delicately, don't I? I don't want to give away my sources. No, but like that was actually, there was a reason I liked this comment when I saw it from One Tit Wonder, and it's because it kind of taps into, on the one hand, one of my favourite things. Well, yes. Keep scratching my back, see what happens. But no, it taps into what I kind of love about this time of year, and also one of the things that I don't actively hate, but I maybe acknowledge sometimes retrospectively that it doesn't do me a whole world of good, which is that there's so much excitement and there's so much hype around this time of year. Key 3, I think we're calling it now, right? As Geoff Keighly has taken on all the responsibility in his stride. And obviously the state of play that One Tit Wonder's referring to was technically a part of the Summer Game Fest, all comes under the Keighly banner. it is this kind of time of excitement, but what you're left with when you kind of look at it a little bit too analytically is a whole bunch of games, some of them known quantities, some of them less so, some of them rumours, some of them confirmed rumours, and not a lot of things that they can all squeeze and kind of funnel into. And so when you're a real fucking weirdo and a nerd like me, who, in spite of how much I think I like surprises, actively goes out of my way to ruin them for me every single time, you kind of are always playing this mental game of like, it's like square peg, round hole, or round peg, round hole, and you're trying to see what fits where. And it's one of those things where, like, Final Fantasy 16 and Resident Evil 4, like, we were looking at that state of play before it happened. We were looking at, you know, the kind of studios that, like, would be there, considering Sony warned us beforehand it would be heavy on third party. The Japanese studios that Sony have obligations with, like Square Enix and Capcom, makes sense. And all of a sudden, like, Final Fantasy 16 and Street Fighter 6 and Resident Evil 4 just seem like the logical options to fit into those positions. Admittedly, I don't know if I was 100% convinced about Resident Evil 4. I thought it was a bit premature, but yeah, it went for the Summer Game Fest tonight. It will happen again on the Xbox Showcase. Like, we don't have enough time today because we've got news to react to make predictions for Xbox's Showcase on Sunday. But if we did, I think we'd get like 70% of the titles, because again, it's like round peg, round hole. Like, Xbox.
Well, you say we.
I mean it.
I'm gonna say you, because I feel like, Jamie, your youthful exuberance and your knowledge of the gaming industry and how much you have your finger on the pulse, and maybe you have some little people behind you, means that you are, not just predictive. You also, you can also see into the future a little bit when it comes to these things, and you're very good at predicting what's going to be there. I have the opposite. I'm very good at looking back 20, 30 years and talking about games that came out, because I'm terrible at keeping up with the news, but I feel it's almost like a superpower as well, because I'm constantly surprised at things I already knew about.
Right, yeah. I wish I had that.
You and Chris often seem to be enamored of my ability to completely forget about something that not only have we talked about, but we've made videos about in the past, and I'll go, what's that game? And then you're both like, we literally covered it and we've done it in a video.
But that's like a memory thing. That's not like a...
Mine's terrible. I'm just learning this. My memory is horrendous. It's really bad.
Yeah, but it's clearly your memory for things that aren't that important. And I think video games fall into that. Like, you remember your kids' names, right?
I just call them 1 and 2.
Okay, that works.
It's easy. It's easier. I play like loads every year. I play so many games because I have to play more. I feel like I have to get a fix of playing a new game. I don't finish all of them. I probably finish I think I worked out once. It's probably like 10%. It's not a high percentage of games that I actually finish that I start. But I play a lot more than I follow. But I do find that it almost makes it more exciting when it comes to these events, because I've then reminded of games that I like the look of and I'm excited about.
That's one of the things I was going to say, is watching Summer Games Fest with you tonight. There were a lot of titles where we saw a logo treatment or we saw a bit of gameplay start up, and I would go, oh, this is X. And you would immediately go, oh yeah, I remember this, even if it was first shown 2 years ago. So there is some kind of deep-rooted memory in there, clearly.
There is, and there's things that trip it that I remember and that I get excited about, and I sort of say, oh, this is... So for one that stood out for me that I'll mention now was... Warhammer 40k Darktide, which is something that I've never played one of those games before. But when we saw the, I guess it was the reveal trailer for it. I think it was last year, maybe.
I can't remember when it was. It was at an Xbox showcase.
It was, but it was a very Left 4 Dead style 4-player co-op shooter thing, and it looked wicked. Set in the Warhammer universe, and that was there tonight, which I was excited about. Unfortunately, we I would mention as well now, because why the hell not? We aren't going to get to see Replaced, which is the sort of pixel art style, almost like the Last Night side-scrolling game, sci-fi punky future game, which sort of swept up a lot of the audience that were sort of a bit let down when Last Night didn't come out, because those guys I think are actually based in Ukraine, and so Geoff Keighly even said that because of the war situation that's going on there at the moment, whilst they were hoping to get a trailer out and get something there tonight, Summer Game Fest, they weren't able to. So hopefully be good to see something from them whenever they do manage to get that, get back to it. But then if your office is half blown to pieces, I guess it's going to put a bit of a stumbling block in your way as to whether or not you can finish a trailer for Summer Game Fest. So
totally
to them on that front.
Those are the kind of unforeseen circumstances that inhibit one's ability to develop and release a video game. But kind of going back a little bit to One Tit Wonder's comment, about predictions for shows and what's going to happen in the future, a lot of it revolves around actually how predictable and how repetitive the games industry really is. And everything really goes in cycles. And a lot of the big, guesses and sort of and predictions you can make for these shows kind of fall into a very small number of buckets. One of them is going to be extremely obvious when you say the names of the likes of Resident Evil 4, Street Fighter 6, and Final Fantasy 16 out loud, and that's that the games industry loves sequels. And unless you thought that Final Fantasy was going to stop at 15, Street Fighter was going to stop at 5, and the Resident Evil remakes that were incredibly successful were going to stop at 3, then you kind of inherently knew that these things were coming, announced or not. It was the classic thing with GTA 6 for years. Like, do you think they're going to stop at 5? No. Well, then does it matter if GTA 6 is announced or not? Obviously, to some people, the answer is yes, but inherently, it's coming. And the other thing, and this applies more to the Xbox showcase, is does a studio exist? Yes. Have they been shut down? No. Do you think they've been sat there for X amount of years twiddling their thumbs? Never, because no one wastes money like that in this industry. Ipso facto, they're making something. So put 2 and 2 together and figure out what it is. It's one of those things. And there are surprises in there, but it's often very cyclical.
Talking about Square Enix, though, is a funny one because I was fine with them. You never know what version of their game it's going to be. Is it going to be a remake? Is it going to be a new one? So it could be 16, but it could also be 4, or it could be 7, or it could be...
True.
Pick a number. Pick a number and you'll be kind of close.
Pick a number and then put any number of words after it. Like it could be 8 Tactics Chronicles, gonorrhea, you name it.
It could be absolutely anything. Hey, but like I said, we did a live stream and we actually watched the showcase together, and we sort of reacted live. And if you are our Patreon, you can go onto our Patreon right now and you can check out that cheeky little video, and you can watch along with us if you did miss it and you'd like to see the game footage and you'd like to see us react to it in real time. I would also like to mention some of our Patreons now, Jamie, some of the lovely people that have gone over to patreon.com and have signed up.
Oh yeah.
And there are some names on screen, but I would also like to read some out. They are Aaron Cameron, Athletic Gravy, Bill Caesar, Brimstone, Cole K, Ice Not Rock Salt, Jesper Camden Nielsen, Leo Merger, Mindful Pig, Mr. Anthropic, Nathan Piers, Neil de Geld's Dream of Prosthetic Moustaches, Daniel, Pastors Guild, Scary Omen, The Baller's Beauty, The Gorgeous Gelding, The Yummy Eunuch, The One and Only Mark Clancy, and then it is the big dogs. There is Brett Z, aka Shell Shock, Doppler, Geometric Potter, Hacksaw Book Reed, Manuel Guerrero, Peaswad, and Mugner, May Your Cock Never Burn Mikkelsen.
Hell yeah.
Thank you so much, guys. Thank you for all of your support. Thank you for keeping the lights on. And like I said, if you do have another 2 hours after you finish this podcast, maybe go and check out that $5 tier bit of content that we've put up there, which is the watch along with Jamie and I for the opening night of Summer Game Fest. Well, kind of the opening night. The PlayStation Showcase was kind of the opening night.
It's a weird one, right? Like it kind of started in media res, if this were a literature thing.
Yeah, and because the Sony thing was also branded as the Summer Game Fest thing, but then tonight was Geoff Keighly, was Key 3, so it's kind of like, it's whatever. Yeah. It was good. That's what I'll say.
It was good. It was solid. It was what I expected it would be.
And I think, like I was saying to you before we actually went live, is I have a weird thing now that it used to be like a few years ago. It was always like, has this won E3? Has that won E3? How good was that showcase? Did they do enough to really sort of like sell it to make me think that show was fantastic? I now have much more of a collectivist feeling and more of a collaborative feeling that Summer Game Fest has brought all of these companies, all of these different reveals together. And it's more of you can't judge Summer Game Fest on one evening of Summer Game Fest. You have to wait. And the months that it's going to be to react to the whole thing.
Yeah, and the competition that was inherent when there was that feeling of, from the first party side of things, Sony would have a night and Microsoft would have a night and Nintendo would have a night, and then from the third party side of things you'd have your EAs and your Ubisofts and the Square Enixes and so on and so forth, various iterations, Bethesda over the years and so on. And so, like, it was much easier to just, like, you watched all of these things within the space of 3 or 4 nights. Sometimes there were 2 or 3 of them in one night, and it was just like second nature to compare them and say, well, X had bigger reveals than Y, and they had more gameplay than Z, and so on and so forth. But you're right, like, Keighley has kind of brought a slightly more collaborative feeling to this, where, like, hey, Sony did technically have a state of play, and Xbox will have a showcase this weekend. But I don't think anyone's, unless you're one of those weirdos on Twitter with like, Kratos as your profile picture and you're sucking off Ragnarok release dates every 2 weeks. Like, no one's really going to go to bat either. Like, it's only for the real fringe people who are going to be like, Resident Evil 4 was way better than Avowed. You guys suck dick. It's much more just like, June is a time where it makes sense to announce games and show more about games. It's not a hugely, fast-moving or popular time when it comes to the actual release calendar, and so it's just a nice time to get a nice message out there. It basically, traditionally, it was always basically the perfect time to say, hey, our game's coming out this fall. Like, put our game on your Christmas list. There are, of course, odds and ends where it's like, we'd really like to remind you that this game is coming out next week. And there's plenty of that in Summer Games Fest. But you're right, like, it's far more of just like a kind of cut and dry, everyone come together to market video games kind of time of year, which is fine. And if you measure your expectations and you don't get too far ahead of yourself, like, you just get to see cool shit. And what's not to like about that?
No, absolutely. And I think that, for me, that's sort of much more collaborative process whereby because it used to be the thing as well that maybe you'd say, oh, is this game going to be shown at this event or is it going to be shown at this event? It does seem with Summer Game Fest, there's more occasions when it's shown at both events and you get some of the same people even popping up. Like, I'm sure Troy Baker will appear again before the end of Summer Game Fest. But that's not necessarily a bad thing. Hey, you can have multiple times.
He might not even be invited. He'll just work his way onto a stage somewhere and be like, the world always needs more Troy Baker, and here I am, baby. No socks, let's rock and roll.
I don't know if the world could handle much more Troy Baker. He does seem to
I've seen him twice in the last 3 hours. I'm not sure I could handle much more Troy Baker, much less the world.
No, that's absolutely true. But right now, Jamie, I don't want to hear about Troy Baker because do you know who I want to hear about? I want to hear about you.
You want to hear about me? What do you want to know? I'm an open book, Jonesy.
What have you been playing in this last week?
I have been playing a couple of things, and weirdly enough, they're all of the free-to-play variety. That wasn't a choice I made beforehand or an adventure I decided to embark on. It was just the way things happened, because they were both fascinating to me for very different reasons. One is a game that has been making headlines, although not for perhaps the reasons it would have initially desired, and that's Diablo Immortal, which is the new Diablo game for mobile, and it's out on PC in beta form. That was kind of initially, it's had a pretty rocky road to release, because I don't know if you remember, this was the game that was announced at BlizzCon many years ago and was immediately met by a number of memes. The whole "you guys don't have phones" meme, the guy who went up and asked a question in the open Q&A and suggested that Diablo Mortal might be an out-of-season April Fool's joke. It's had a rocky road to getting here, as I said, and it's been testing and feels like it's been out in various locations around the world for some combinations of weeks or months, and now it's finally just out there globally. Well, unless you live in certain European nations where it breaks gambling laws and it's just straight up not allowed to come out, like Belgium and the Netherlands. And yeah, like, I'll be honest with you, when I started playing it, I played the mobile version for like maybe half an hour to an hour, and then I played the PC version for like maybe another hour or two, and I just thought it was fine. I thought it was...
Did you transition because it was bad on mobile and it was better on PC, or was it just because you were like, let me try this on multiple platforms?
It was initially that I wanted to try it across both, and it ended up being that the PC version was far more preferable, even though the PC port in its current state is really not up to snuff. Basic things like being able to change the resolution in-game just doesn't exist. The assets don't particularly look like they were designed to scale up. I found controller support horrible on the PC, to the point where I ended up playing some weird version of mouse and keyboard where I was clicking to move and using 1 to 4 on my keyboard as like to hotkey various moves, and I don't know, it felt weird. But in spite of that, I thought that it was a sufficiently good sort of revision of what Diablo does well, made to work for a mobile format. In that, like, you've got less screen real estate, you can, you can't maybe go quite as hard on, like, it's going to be less of a game. And of course, it's free to play as well, so it's going to have different trappings, it's going to have a different, it's going to have a different length, it's going to have a different end game. It has more sort of like quasi MMO style elements that reminded me of like you know how games like Destiny and whatnot flirt with other MMO style ideas, like seeing other players out in the wild, and you can kind of engage in some of their fights as long as they're not quest sensitive, and you can predominantly play solo, but then when you get to certain areas like dungeons, it offers you the opportunity to party up. And I thought it was fine. I thought it was mostly fun. And I thought they'd just taken the components of Diablo that make sense in just about any format and brought them over to mobile, and they hadn't lost too much of the magic along the way. The overwhelming feeling I got, though, was just that, like, I'd rather just be playing a Diablo game. Like, right. Especially when I'm on the PC. Like, why am I playing a kind of a
mobile port?
Yeah, like, why am I playing a mobile Diablo when I have Diablo 3? And, like, there are things that fundamentally Diablo 3 does far better than Immortal, even though it's not the hot, new, fresh thing. And I kind of left it at that. And then in the days that followed, the internet blew up because it became a huge controversy with regards to its potential pay-to-win mechanics. It's a slightly complicated, wishy-washy issue because essentially the way Blizzard are kind of framing it at the moment, and the game director who's been receiving a lot of heat, is that they don't see it as pay to win because you can't directly spend any money to invest in what they refer to as gear. So gear being right. The weapon or armor that you might put in those slots. The issue is that there are things that you slot into the gear you have. I think they're called gems. I forget a lot of the terminology, and those gems do have a lot of heavy like microtransaction association. And you need lots of those gems, or you need them particularly high level, and upgrading them is its own kettle of fish to be as powerful as you want to be. And so then reports started coming out saying that estimations for getting a maxed out Diablo Immortal character at the moment suggest it would cost $110,000, which again is a pretty rough headline to have in your game's global release. Is less than a week old.
That's hilarious, but also it's not that surprising because anytime you have like pay-to-win elements in a game, even if they try and sort of hide the pay-to-win elements apparently in a game, you know that because the prices have to cater for the fact that most people aren't going to spend all the money to upgrade a character max. So they do end up being very, very expensive because they're maybe you're only going to make one purchase of like $5 or whatever. But they also don't want to exhaust the amount of upgrading you can do, so I'm not that surprised that if you just sunk everything into it, you can get to 110,000.
Because their statistics probably say, okay, we have X million players, 0.5% of them are going to spend money, and 0.01% of them are going to spend a large amount of money. And on the basis that 99.9% of people aren't going to spend a large amount of money, how much room do we want to leave for those whales to spend should they be willing? And if the sad fact is, and we know this now, is if you let someone spend over $100,000 in a game, they will do it. Like, there are people out there who will do it. It sounds crazy, but believe me, it's true.
I've always wondered if there's like an Elon Musk or a Jeff Bezos or someone like that who gets addicted to like a Candy Crush or something, and they're or whatever it is, and they're so rich that they just don't care, and they see something that's like buy 50,000 gold for $5,000, and they're like, yeah.
I would do that if I was a billionaire.
Why not?
Yeah, like, fuck it.
Do you know what? You could sit there, look at your watch, and literally you tap the button to spend another $5,000 only when you see a certain amount of time pass, like 3 seconds, when you know you've just made $5,000. Yeah, so you go,
yeah, exactly.
Yep, and you know that your net, like, what do you call it? Your level. So you've not spent or lost anything. So you're fine. You've only spent interest. So you're like, it's fine.
Oh, what a life that would be.
I'm just killing a worker in another country.
Yeah, exactly.
That's right.
One less factory worker in China, one more legendary gem for me. It's a 1 in 1 out equation.
Super simple, yeah. Easy decision.
We're giving Elon Musk ideas now. We've got to be careful. So yeah, that was the controversy, and I will say also that the game has a lot of sort of like leaderboardy style tracking that obviously gets quite competitive, and there is straight up PvP content, and then of course you get into a real grey area where the combination of PvP and pay to win obviously gets very dicey. So lots of uproar. It is now, I think, it is certainly Blizzard's lowest ever rating on Metacritic in terms of the user score. I think it was like, I don't even want to guess, but I think it was like 0.5 or something like that. So yeah, they're taking a hammering for this. I'm sure the game is still doing just fine in terms of downloads and revenue, but the reputation of the game has really been sullied. And there is still a bit of a discussion, because I think fundamentally, and I do get this argument, there is still probably like a really solid amount of content that one can get out of this completely for free without feeling pressured to spend any money. And considering it's like not a bad game alongside that, there is still something here where I'm like, if someone asked me, should they be put off by these microtransactions to the extent that they don't ever touch Diablo Immortal, I'd say, well, obviously just like follow your own, your own morals and how your own feeling about all this stuff and whether or not you feel like you're supporting it by downloading and playing the game. But fundamentally, like, there's a half decent Diablo game on mobile right now. And, in previous years, that in itself would have been a really cool headline. I think there's like 20 hours of content that you can play without feeling any pressure whatsoever to become monetized as a human. And that's also not an inconsiderable, but it's not like a small amount of time. But I totally get that the when looked at its most extreme, the monetization of this game is really fucked up. And I get why so many people are unwilling to support a game like that.
Yeah, it is a strange one, because you do have, on one hand, you can make the argument, hey, look, if you don't want to spend the money, don't spend any money, and they're giving you stuff for free. Like, how can you, don't look a gift horse in the mouth and all that. But at the same time, there is also the idea of, as a fan of something like Diablo, because it is under that bracket, it's very difficult to say, hey, do you know what? I'm going to steer well clear of that, and I'm not going to touch it, knowing that it's going to try and incentivize you to spend real world money on it. Relentlessly.
I ended up doing both. I feel like I had a good 5 hours and I don't need to touch it again. And if anything, it just kind of made me glad that a Diablo 4 is in development, assuming Blizzard do right by that game. And I don't think that's a bad take to have. There's more Diablo around the corner, and there are better, fairer loot games out there too. It's still a bit of a shame that this has gone south in the way it has.
Yes.
Again, people who want to have fun with it, have fun with it. People want to spend money. People want to create petitions to send Blizzard into the Shadow Realm. I get that as well. When it comes to microtransactions, there are a million takes out there, and I find it hard to argue or disagree with any single one of them. But for me, it's I just had my time, and I'm going to move on because I don't really want to engage with it.
Yeah, which is the way to play it. That is absolutely the way to go. If you can just have something, enjoy it, and then say I'm done with it. Then, no.
Do you know what else? Do you know what other free to play game I don't really want to engage with anymore?
You've given away the best bit. I was excited to find out whether or not you enjoyed this or not.
No, that's harsher than it sounds. I played Roller Champions, which is Ubisoft's long-awaited free to play weird rollerblading dodgeball / handball kind of game.
Yep.
And do you know what, the most honest thing I can say about this, and it's the most damning thing I can say about this game as well, is that it's just completely unremarkable. There's absolutely nothing wrong with it, but that's just not enough nowadays. Do you know what I mean?
That could be the tagline for Ubisoft in this day and age.
Yeah.
They're unremarkable. There's nothing wrong with it, but there's nothing that amazing in this game.
It, especially in the free-to-play scene, as we were just talking about, you can't just release a game that there's nothing wrong with and expect it to sink, not to sink when others swim.
For sure,
Roller Champions, for anyone that hasn't seen, it's a 3v3 kind of sports game that's clearly heavily inspired by the successes of games like Rocket League. You essentially are on rollerblades going around a kind of NASCAR-looking oval ring. When you go through 4 checkpoints, a goal that is a kind of big Quidditch-like circle in the air opens up, and you can throw the ball into that circle to score a goal, or you can try and do more laps to build up more points that you will eventually earn when you score that goal. But if you lose the ball and the other team get possession, then your sort of run is over, and they have to start doing laps to earn points to then score the goal and get them added to the scoreboard. It plays completely fine. There is kind of as you can imagine, you played Riders Republic, right? So you can imagine Ubisoft making a game about rollerblading. Fundamentally, there is something to the weight and the physics and the movement and the way you pump your legs to build up speed that feels quite nice. And you go up the sides of the ramps because it's all sort of curved at the edges. Like the momentum and the movement feels sufficient. The passing feels okay. There's a nice kind of like tackle button, which is you're just basically just annihilate people like it's ice hockey. But yeah, it just felt like completely unremarkable. Like I just played it for an hour or two with a friend, and we were like, "This is a totally fine free-to-play sports game, and there's absolutely no reason to play it."
Is it the kind of free-to-play sports game that you think some people will get their teeth into, and it will actually be a bit of a sleeper hit, or it'll start to get a bit more traction, or do you think it's one that will just sort of quietly die away?
You never know, and like I feel like if I took a punt on a question like this with every single free-to-play game that came and went, I'd maybe be right 50% of the time, and this is absolutely one of those times. Right, my current guess is, though, that this will not have much of a life, purely based on the fact that this game has been out for, I think, over 2 weeks now, and I almost had to remind myself that this game existed and go out there and seek it out. Like, it's not making much noise. Ubisoft aren't making much noise about it. Yeah, it just feels like a bit of an unfortunate thing that should have not only come out probably a couple of years ago, but also been better, to put it bluntly.
It's so strange to me. Like, we'll talk about a game later on that was made by most of it was made by one guy and has got a lot more excitement behind it than anything Ubisoft have done in the last few years, which is so weird because they're such a good company, and I really hope that they sort out. I think they fundamentally have a marketing problem, for one. Like they just seem to make games that are perfectly fine, perfectly serviceable, whatever, but then they just kind of disappear, and then they're not really disappeared, and then they just kind of come out, and then no one says anything about them, and then they just go away.
You kind of hinted at it yourself, though, like a few minutes ago. Like, is doing something that's perfectly fine and perfectly serviceable enough anymore? Like, they're making big budget fine things.
But I think sometimes the marketing can be the difference between something which is fine doing well and something which is fine just disappearing. Because I think if you stand behind something and you really shout loud enough, if you can get enough people to play it, you will find enough people who say, no, this is actually really good. I think this is fun. I enjoy it. Who will stick with it. Whereas Ubisoft don't even seem to try and find those people. They just seem to let a game.
Yeah, but wouldn't the solution, like, beyond marketing to be start making better games?
Yes, yeah, no, that is absolutely something they should do. But I guess that's the harder
Have
prospect.
you ever considered a career in consultancy, Jonesy? I should put you and Eve on the phone. Have you considered making better games?
Oh no, I never thought about like this. Thank you for your idea.
Market them. Make better games, market them. But hey.
Question mark, profit.
Yes.
So yeah, that was my weekend free-to-play gaming. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for having us. Okay, I'm going to keep this quite quick because I didn't do much playing. Well, no, that's not true. I did do a bit, but I'm going to keep it short because it was an older game. Red Dead Redemption 2. I'm still on my kick of going back and finishing games that I hadn't finished yet. I believe I was like halfway through Red Dead Redemption 2 when I went back to it. I've played another fair few hours. It did take me a little while to get back into it, actually. It took me a while we talked about it not too long ago, and you absolutely rejected the idea that there's any kind of...
It's a perfect game.
There's any kind of
jank.
Finessing. No, I'm going to use a nice word. Finessing that Rockstar need to do to some of their games sometime. And I know why it is because that game works very, very well when you are locking on to enemies to shoot them in the head while they're riding on a horse behind you. Like, it locks on brilliantly, etc., etc. And it feels great. There is some finessing that needs to be done, and I did bump into a few issues where I was like, this game's controls are so annoying. But after, an hour or so, I was right back into it. And phenomenal story. And I always do this with old games. Not even older, like, not that old games, but that I don't finish.
Not new.
Not new games. I sometimes miss massive cinematic things or standout levels or just things that I never got to in a game, and someone will say to me, oh, did you enjoy that level? And I'm like, oh, I don't think I ever got to that level. And then it blows my mind when I do go back and do it, and I'm like, oh, how did I miss that? It actually happened to me with The Last of Us.
Oh, The Last of Us. I thought I got excited that you were going to say about it happening in Red Dead.
No, and it did happen in Red Dead.
Oh, okay, good.
It happened in Red Dead too. And one of the things that happened to me that I hadn't done was where you get to ride in a hot air balloon with some old boy who takes you up, and you sort of looking for John Marsden in prison. And then you see the O'Driscolls who are attacking Sadie, and you've got to like shoot from the balloon. I mean, ludicrous. Balloons don't follow people like that, but very cinematic, very enjoyable. Had a real fun experience. I've obviously done the whole like South America thing. and then come back to.
Did you even know that portion of the game existed?
Yes, no, I did not existed, but I wasn't quite sure about how it slotted in. I wasn't because I'd heard people mention it, and I thought it was almost like the game goes to South America, and that's where you spend the latter half of the game. But then when I played it, and I actually looked online when I sort of first went there, just to kind of get an idea about how long that section was, and a few people saying like, "What was the point of this?" Because it's so brief.
I mean,
there's not a lot you can do, and I was like, "Oh, okay."
The point of that location is not for like open world or gameplay purposes, though. It's character purposes. That's where there are some significant shifts in the relationship between Arthur and Dutch that happen there.
Yes, no, for sure there are, and I think how palpable the sort of disconnect between Dutch and the rest of the gang get. I'd kind of started to forget, and then that was actually a good place to come back in because it kind of reminds you and doubles down on a lot of that stuff. And then started to cause fractures between the gang and everything. But no, the story of that game is definitely the thing which I think is the strongest element for me. And so I'm happy to be back into it, and I'm with it to the end.
Rock and roll. What was the Last of Us thing you were mentioning about a cinematic?
I stopped playing originally on the PlayStation 3. I stopped playing The Last of Us 1 when you crash the car, and you. I think you get out and then you start fighting the humans for the first time. And I stopped around there, and because I thought it was going to be more of clickers and whatever. And I remember you saying to me at the time, no, you're so close to like the best latter third of a game ever. You need to carry on playing. Like you're just before it gets really good. And I was like, am I? And so then I bought it on, and then I borrowed it from you, the PlayStation 4 version, and then I finished it. And I was like, holy hell, Jamie, I can't believe I nearly didn't finish this game.
Yeah.
Because all from that point on, that game just gets phenomenal and gets.
Yeah, I agree. Because that's where you meet the brothers just before you leave that area, right? And then that whole sub story has its own very sad ending. And then then there's the university and everything that happens to Joel. Yeah, there's some great stuff in there.
There's
Winter, which I think is what you were like referring to, I think at least in broader terms, right? Like when the snow starts to fall.
Yes, yeah. No, and it's just I always do it, and I always miss these big cinematic things because they often come in the final third because they're sort of setting up the end, and I always seem to fall off games sort of toward the end of the second third because it's that middle section where it gets a little bit drier, and especially if it's an open world game, I start to go wandering off and looking for side quests.
Oh yeah, that's exactly where I lost Ghost of Tsushima.
Right, okay, yeah, exactly. So easy to do it in a game like that. Super easy to do it in a game like that. So the two other things I will briefly mention because I have done them as well is I watched Invasion on Apple TV. A good series, weirdly low budget.
Invasion. It doesn't ring a bell. I'm going to have to do some live Googling while you describe it.
So Invasion is a series about an alien force that come to Earth and start seemingly attacking people, and no one knows what's going on. And it's like world over, people are getting attacked, and there's sort of lots of different characters, different people that you follow around the world as this stuff's happening, and you see, how they're dealing with it, how they're involved in the invasion, or how they're trying to stop the invasion, I should say. And it's like, so you follow like a husband and wife and their two kids, and then you follow like a Japanese engineer who works for the communications engineer who works for JASA, and they're trying to like figure out what's happened to their satellites. And then you follow like this American soldier who's in Kabul when it kicks off, and then he's trying to like make his way back to America. And it's a very good series. I really enjoyed it from the human side of it and from seeing the different people, and the actors were fantastic, and I think it was very good from that aspect. As an alien invasion film, it was quite low budget in the CGI side of it. But what's clever was they knew their budget and they knew their ability. So what they've done is completely serviceable. You won't see any dodgy sort of monster models or anything. Like everything they've done is completely serviceable and absolutely fine. You're not going to be put off by low budget stuff. Well, they just don't show stuff they can't afford to show, which was refreshing. I will give them that, but noticeable, if that makes sense. So you might not see something happen directly. You'll see someone's reaction to it. Okay. You might not see the alien eat the person and eviscerate them, it'll just like they'll disappear behind a bookshelf.
Right, it's often quite indirect, kind of.
Indirect is the word. There's a couple of more notable situations where it happens where in a big budget series they would go to town and you'd see the car crash, you'd see it flip over, you'd see an explosion, but they
like War of the Worlds.
Yes, yeah. You don't see, but sometimes you don't see that. But it's a good series. It needs a season 2. I don't really know where they're going with where they're up to. It's definitely finished on a cliffhanger. But enjoyable, very cool. And the other thing that I'm watching at the moment is Severance, because you and Chris talked about it so much that I
was hoping that you were about to say that another thing you've seen this past week was Severance, but no, you're still watching it. How far through are you?
I think maybe 4 or 5 episodes. I'm not really sure.
Okay.
I can't quite remember. A weird show. I have no idea where it's going to go at the moment.
Like, God, yes, you don't. You're right, you don't.
I have ideas. I don't want to ruin it for other people though. For people who haven't seen it, I'll mention them to you after.
Yeah, sure.
You can nod and just not tell me. But a very strange show, a very cool show. Some good ideas, some interesting.
I was going to say because like I always thought that even as the mysteries are still kind of like unraveling, and you get towards some of the big reveals and twists that might make more sense later on in the season, I still thought that the early episodes and the build up and the kind of the kind of the science fiction behind what they're actually what's actually happening in the show, and some of the kind of like the more meta level things, that the kind of the reflections on people's actual work-life balance and real life corporate structure, and like some of those almost Stanley Parable-esque kind of like fourth wall breaking elements. I always thought they'd be right up your street for some reason. I don't know why. I don't know. Is it hitting, or is it at the moment is it just good?
No, it's hitting. It's wicked.
Okay,
It's very cool. No, you're right. Some of the sci-fi stuff I love. Like if you haven't seen it, I'll give you a tiny snapshot for people out there who are listening or watching. So you have people who work on a floor of a building where they are severed, which means that their personality, their memories, and everything are tied to a specific place. So effectively, what they do is they separate your mind so that it is locational. So when people arrive at work, they become one person who is effectively born on their first day of work, if you like. They have no memories before that point. But then when they leave in the lift or they go out of a door or whatever, they become their original self. And neither of those personalities ever talk to each other or interact. So effectively, and this is the freakiest, most horrible part of it, you get in the lift to go home from work, the lift goes up, but halfway up in the lift ride, you switch to the other person. That person goes home, has dinner, hangs out with their family, has all the off time, comes back, gets in the lift, goes down, and then it switches back to the work person again. But for the work person, they effectively just are immediately back at work.
Yeah, it's like the elevator doors close and immediately open, and you never left work.
They never left. They just are suddenly refreshed because their alter self, their outie as they call it, has had a sleep. But if their outie went and got wrecked and is hungover, they will feel like crap. And they'll be like, oh, I feel terrible. And they try and guess like what their outies do. Like they say to each other, oh, you stink today. Or, oh, you look amazing. You must have had a really restful weekend. And they're like, it was the weekend? And they just find it really strange because they don't have any sense of the outside world. But it also delves into the psychology of what can you do to someone who can't leave.
Yeah.
Which is very strange, and it does go to some dark places.
Also the psychology of like, and there are some games that have tried to grapple with this in the past. I remember Soma was one of them, interestingly enough. Like, kind of, can you get to a point where, and different, TV shows and movies and games do it through different means, where you can kind of acknowledge that there is a separate version of yourself, and how can you kind of like empathize with them or relate to what they're going through, or like acknowledge that they are you, but you are not them in a weird way.
Right.
Like the reason that's been on my mind a lot lately. Did you ever see the movie Primer?
Yes.
The time travel movie. Yeah, exactly. Yes. And for anyone that doesn't know, one of the things, so Primer is very careful about the way it establishes its time travel premise and the way its unique form of time travel works. And one of the side effects of the time travel in Primer is essentially people travel back in time to a point where the version of them from the past that's about to go and do everything they just did exists. So every time you travel back in time, you're essentially creating a double, and you have to not interact with the past version of yourself in order to not create an anomaly. And it's fine, because if the two versions of you never meet or interact or never do anything that creates any kind of disturbance in the time travel, then you know the version of you from the past is going to go and get into the time travel machine and disappear into your current past. And you can keep living, and that's completely fine. And it creates an infinite loop that closes itself once you've exceeded the amount of time that you travelled back by. But there is still that fascinating thing of, like, for a certain period of time, like, that's you. They are literally you, but they're just on their own thing. And it's like, whose consciousness are you with, and who are you inside? Like, if you created a double of yourself right now, which one are you? You're both of them, but which one are you? Like, yeah, it's weird. I know that's fucking stupid, but yeah.
No, it's not
I like
stupid
that
at all.
kind of stuff.
It's the idea. It's the multiplicity thing, right? It's also that thing of how would you know which one you are? Because you would be like, were you the original? And they'd both go, yeah, but one of them is wrong.
Like that's so minor spoilers, I think, but I think that from what I remember, that's what Soma does. It's like, the way you get out of this situation is by, like, we will create two of you, and one of you will stay and one of you will go. And it's like, if you're the one that stayed, then, like, it's very interesting. Like, if you double yourself, like, which one are you?
There's something they also do in Altered Carbon, because in Altered Carbon, obviously, you can take your memories and you can put them into another body. But one of the things they deal with in some of those episodes is you can double sleeve, so you can effectively duplicate your stack and you can put it in another body. So then there are two of you walking around, and some of the things they mess around with later on in this, I think, first season, is they sort of say, like, you as the viewer don't know which one's which, and one of them is, like, gonna go to their death possibly, and you don't know who is it, your one or is it the other one? But it's like, but do you have a one? Is there an original one, or is No, very interesting, very cool stuff. Weird shows on Apple TV which are right up my street, and there's a few more as well, like sci-fi wacky stuff. But do you know what? Apple TV are not the only company who seem to absolutely bloody love a bit of sci-fi, a bit of spacefaring, especially if you throw horror into there. Because at Summer Game Fest, we were treated to a number of space horrors. They seem to be coming thick and fast, and we will get to them, but we're going to go in chronological order, so I'm not going to jump ahead of myself. But we will get some space horrors, don't worry. But first up, it won't take that long, actually. It won't take that long at all. First up, though, was a quick look at Street Fighter VI, which was showing off some footage of Guile, who's, a fan favourite and has been around since the beginning days, because I remember in Street Fighter II, I used to call him Ghoulie, because I thought that's how he said his name.
Yeah.
And he was my favourite character.
I think if I'd played Street Fighter 2 back in the day, he would have been mine as well, just for the music. I love that the character's theme has become more famous than he is, but that's just the way the internet goes, I think, sometimes.
And the haircut, of course.
I mean, the haircut's iconic, yeah.
Street Fighter 6 is a fantastic looking fighting game, and we got a little taste at the PlayStation Showcase, whereby they're going to put out some sort of different game modes where there's like an open, more of an open world feel to one. I can't remember the other two. So one's also a normal battle mode.
There's like a battle hub, and there's a versus thing, and like there's footage of people running around Metro City. Like almost looks like at times they're engaging random people in fights. I don't know, but I don't mind that. I think that's what we're going to have to get used to that with Street Fighter 6, where there's that classic thing with fighting games, especially with big rosters, where each new announcement, unless it's all been leaked, which is basically the case with Street Fighter 6, admittedly, but the rosters are obviously things that get people excited, and so now Capcom have an excuse to kind of come back every month or so and be like, did you know that Cammy's in this one? And they're
basically following the Super Smash Bros. Formula of just like announcing a character, hoping people will get excited. And then, Jamie, we got treated to our first dose of starfaring horror, because Aliens Dark Descent, which had a very nice cinematic trailer, and we were trying to figure out what Aliens game we were looking at. But we were both quite surprised, I think, to realise that it was an isometric game coming out in 2023. It looked cool. Like the isometric style definitely works with Aliens, in that obviously we've seen it in a number of other games, like the Ascent, quite recently for one.
Yeah.
What do you reckon? Is this one that you think you might have to get your hands on?
Like totally, like the shift when they kind of revealed that slightly more isometric perspective was an odd one, because like you said, we were trying to place it, and I think at the time we were kind of more convinced that it was going to maybe be some kind of DLC or even a sequel to the Aliens Fireteam Elite game that came out not that long ago. I think the thing about that is that it proved that when you get people together and give them guns from the Alien franchise and tell them to shoot xenomorphs, there's fun to be had. And so the idea of another studio exploiting that from a different perspective, you mentioned The Ascent, like a great example of like, you know, isometric or twin stick shooters, you know, can be a lot of fun, even more so in co-op. And xenomorphs are fun to kill. Like the more green blood that splattered, the better. And
just don't touch it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Don't let them get too close and don't touch the blood and you'll be fine. I definitely give this a go. And again, like you talked about the kind of the space horror theme that seemed weirdly present throughout this. This was one of the least scary versions of that, which I'm also on board for. Like I can kill xenomorphs now without getting the jitters.
It is true. The isometric shooter is one that doesn't sort of stoke fear in the player, because I'm completely fine with them. What I'm not fine is a game like the Callisto Protocol. That we got an extended look at. We got to see a bit more gameplay than we've seen recently. It looks even more like Dead Space than we at first thought. I think when we were watching, you pointed out the fact that the space suit that he's wearing and the green bar at the back of the neck is like looks very, very similar to a health bar that Isaac had on the back of him. But also, he's got a gravity gun, which they showed off, which looked pretty cool, which again looked something very much like something out of Dead Space. Coming December 2nd, so we actually don't have to wait too long either to play this game. I'm not going to be able to play it, but I really want to, which is a shame.
See, I think I might, because Dead Space was really fucking scary. Even Dead Space 2, in its own right, was really fucking scary, and yet I kind of managed with them for some reason. And there was something about just how violent and visceral it was, and there was something about shooting off limbs and curb stomping what were they called in necromorphs? They were called in Dead Space. That was like satisfying and impactful enough that I was like, actually, I can keep going. And I think there might be a little bit of that present in the Callisto Protocol too. And like when we were watching it live together, I kept saying I'm really trying as hard as I can to give these guys the benefit of the doubt and not invoke the name Dead Space. But they really, really, really wanted us to know that this is a hell of a lot like Dead Space. Because again, it was exactly like I just said. You were shooting limbs off alien creatures, and when their limbs came off, they crawled towards you, and when they crawled towards you, you just started curb stomping the shit out of them long after they're dead. And you also have a player character that dies in lots of gross ways.
Yes. I think one we got to see was a neck-toothy monster, like where they open and then the teeth are all like round here, just bite your character's face off, which was very Mortal Kombat. So
like one of the more gruesome decapitations I can remember seeing lately, and I've been watching a lot of Live Leak.
Well, there you go. Modern Warfare 2 though didn't have any horrible decapitations, but it did have lots of water. And it looked particularly nice. There was some gameplay on a boat, on a cargo ship with some containers sliding all around. I think we were saying at the time as well that it's the same engine that Modern Warfare from 2019 used, and it's putting it to good effect. Looks very, like I said as well, it looks very good in sort of close quarters, in confined spaces. Still looks very good when it's opened up, when it's a bit more spread out. But it was really good to actually get to see some footage ahead of its release, obviously coming out in October, I think it is. Is it October?
Yeah, I think you're right, actually. Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Like, there were some interesting kind of technical things to observe early on, because as you said, it's kind of an adaptation and a progression of that MW engine that was really impressive when it came around in 2019. And you kind of got this all playing out in the backdrop of now they're unifying the Call of Duty engine, so all future entries in the Call of Duty series and even spin-offs like Warzone will use this one engine, which allows, a lot more cohesive creation on their part. Hugely important and beneficial move from like a technical perspective, but it was interesting to see how it would benefit or hinder potentially the visuals on display here. And I think they felt good. There is still, we discussed it when we were live streaming, there is still an element here of like, this is also a PlayStation 4 game. This is a game that's coming out on a 9-year-old console. Like there are elements here where I'm not suggesting they're being completely held back by previous gen, but I don't think they've gone whole hog. They've also done it looked like they're doing a lot more in-engine presentation for what might have once been cinematics in previous years. Again, that might be a conscious choice, but fundamentally, actually, you know what? The last thing I'll say is I think one of the more interesting things about Modern Warfare 2, this Modern Warfare 2, is that kind of Central South American setting. You know, lots of talk about like a Mexican Special Forces, soldier fighting alongside Task Force 141 and the cartel and all this stuff. And I think that seems like a really interesting backdrop for a campaign, but it comes a hell of a lot less interesting when the first thing we see was like a weird sort of like oil rig mission followed by, you know, a big nighttime fight on a tanker. And it's like, I'd like to see some more of the environmental variety that hopefully is being introduced to the campaign. But at the end of the day, it's Call of Duty, right? Like, we'll see it eventually.
There's going to be a lot of nighttime fighting and night vision goggles and all sorts.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, not long to wait for that one, which obviously Call of Duty every year. But I don't know if it's going to... It definitely doesn't have the sort of like the murmurings around that Modern Warfare 1 had, but maybe that's just because it's... I don't even know what to call it now. Modern Warfare 2019 had. Yeah. But maybe that's because it's that was a remake and it was a really big deal, and this is kind of a...
But even still, like, there were murmurings about, like, the tone and the content and how dark it was, and that Camden Townhouse mission that was demoed for the press and, like, spawned a very interesting range of reactions. It doesn't look like there's anything like that going on here.
No. Which is what I mean. They've gone maybe for a different... Maybe they've gone for a different thing, or maybe the journos just aren't as shit up this time. So
they're not as shook up. They're like, who are you going after? The South America. It's fine. The cartel. Go for it.
Do what you want.
We're not shooting babies anymore. It's fine.
Then I got a little treat because after 30 years, Flashback is making a comeback with Flashback 2, and it looks very good. Flashback, for anyone who doesn't know, was a side-scrolling kind of like action-y, mystery adventure game. But they've sort of taken the aesthetic from Flashback and they've updated it to the modern day, but it still incorporates that pixel art style with some more 3D elements, but it's not... it doesn't look like it's an outright 3D game, maybe sort of like 2.5D, but with some cool ways of incorporating that into the game. But yeah, I'm psyched to see what they've actually done with this because, like I said, it's heart. Flashback is a mystery game, trying to figure out what the hell's going on, and this is sort of hopefully going to be a very well written return to form. So I'll be looking forward to that one.
I'll keep my fingers crossed for you.
Thank you, mate. Then we got a look at Witchfire, which was this. I don't even know how to describe it. It's like a Western meets fantasy, magic sort of mashup.
Yeah, that's not a bad way to describe it at all.
But it looks good. The gunfighting looked cool. The combat looked fun, but I think it doesn't look like there's going to be anything to grab me particularly from the outset. It just looks like another one of these sort of like fantasy shooty games, which I'm sure if you're into, you're into.
Yeah. I kind of second that. Like, I think the gunplay itself looked good, and like the effects looked great, and it looked impactful, and there was a nice variety in terms of the weapons, and the design of the weapons and the enemies seemed suitably unique. But there is also something about a trailer that is just kind of like a sequence of first-person encounters strung together that doesn't really give you a semblance of what the game is on the whole, and kind of broader ideas around potential setting or story. And like, I don't know enough about this game to say how important that is to what they're trying to do or trying to make here, but it did kind of leave you feeling like this is the thing that looks cool, but I don't know why I should be excited about it yet.
No, me either. It looks very... I don't really want to like throw too many names of games out there, but it does look very similar to a whole bunch of games that have come out and have gone, and and people have said, oh yeah, it's fine, and then it just is what it is. So there you go. Next up, we got back to the spacefaring horror because Fort Solace, starring Troy Baker and Roger Clark.
Yes,
Roger Clark. There you go. The voices of Arthur Morgan from Red Dead Redemption 2, and obviously Troy Baker, the voice from every game ever, have been roped in this indie game where they are on a sort of I guess it's a forward human spacefaring post on a planet. I'm not quite sure what planet. But there are some definite shenanigans afoot because we get to see somebody sort of go into a hab, in the spacesuit, and there's sort of some bloody handprints, and there's some dodginess having gone on. Definitely not as scary feeling as Callisto Protocol, but maybe more of a horror mystery or a thriller.
I think that there's still some work to be done when it comes to informing all of us as potential players as to what the gameplay components here are, and how they got Troy Baker and Roger Clark out there to talk about the game, and they talked about there being more action oriented gameplay than you might believe based on that cinematic. But still, fundamentally, it's a bit of a guessing game. But like you said to me at the time, when I was kind of like a bit dismissive of it, because I was like, you've just kind of got two dudes here coming out and promising that the game's going to be fun. But the two dudes are two, for all the jokes we make about them, clearly very talented voice actors who you would hope, and again, I don't know enough about them and their careers and how in demand they are, but you'd hope they're two guys that are drawn to good work and good writing. And would team up with an indie studio like this because there's something about the project that attracted them to it, and not just like that they had a gap in their diary and the check was big enough. I know Troy Baker's done some games in the past that haven't been amazing, but like this, I hope here that I hope the idea here is that they brought in these two big heavy hitters because there is a lot of meat on the bone in narrative terms, and they just want two guys who they know are going to get stuck in and have the chops.
Yeah, and I think even though he's been in some sort of questionable games, I don't think he's never sort of knowingly put his name to or his voice to an outright bad game. I think it's often a game which is a little bit questionable, but they're always big budget games, and usually I think when things go awry, it seems to be more like maybe a misjudgment with regards to something like Marvel's Avengers, for example, was still a massive budget game which just didn't quite hit in the right way.
But he also doesn't put in bad performances. Like, I love to dunk on Troy Baker because I think his his character and his demeanor and the way he presents himself is easy to goof on. But like, the dude's damn good at what he does.
He's phenomenal, which is why it's funny to dunk on him, because it's like dunking on someone who is the top of their craft. It makes it humorous. Like, he has the right to be arrogant in a lot of respects because he's so in demand. He's so good at what he does. Hey, but it still makes it funny when you get to like take the piss occasionally.
Oh yeah.
But if it is a game which is going to be relying heavily on like some real caliber voice actors, like they've also, I think Julia Brown was another one that they named in it, who's another well-known actress, although I have no idea who she is. Then I think they maybe are aiming for a heavily story-led, intriguing kind of game. And if it's an indie, it's probably going to be more that than maybe something like the Callisto Protocol. But I'm all for that. Like, I'm much more likely to be able to play that than some terrifying necromorphy, crawling, stomping, whatever game.
You're just giving Chris ideas when you do stuff like this, Jonesy. He's plotting and scheming live streams with each further game you announce you have no desire to play.
Yes, absolutely. Speaking of which, they then hit us immediately with another game, which I think you at the time said it and you were bang on, looked like Alien Isolation. It was the someone crawling through vents and then arming themselves with what looked like a mini sort of rangefinder TV camera thing, looking at a robot which was sort of mooching around being shady. And then your character got picked up and by some horrendously looking Five Nights at Freddy's fucked up robot with a weird face. Yes. And I'm like, I'm out. Alien Isolation, messed up Five Nights at Freddy's robot faces, and them squeezing me to death. I don't want to play that game either.
Like, of all the scary games we talked about so far, this is the one I want to play the least. Because again, in the Callisto Protocol, as you discussed, there's a gun that they give you that lets you pick these weird zombie aliens up and shoot them into fans and stuff and let them get blown up into a million chunks. All the vibes this was giving me was that pure Alien Isolation tension of you're completely defenseless, you're sneaking around, you're trying to walk behind these big robots, and if they notice you, they're going to turn around and snap your neck and you will instantly die. And all you can do to help on your journey is like use these weird retro devices with CRT displays that look like they should be like playing a VHS in some weird other dimension. And how that helps, I don't know, and I don't really want to find out. But it's a cool look. It's a very... there are some people out there that are going to be jazzed that, given the lack of an Alien Isolation follow-up, that something like this is happening.
They will be. But we had a little bit of a respite from the alien horror because The Rock showed up.
A respite from the alien horror, not necessarily the horror in general.
Maybe not. The Rock briefly showed up on his own phone, pre-recorded, with no shirt on in his home gym, to promote Fortnite and also his energy drink and a bit of Black Adam. So we got treated to a Rock triple threat. But all good.
It was almost like the clause in the contract says like, The Rock will only do a Summer Game Fest segment if he can promote 3 things in 90 seconds. It was weird.
I would like it if he'd have turned up on the stage and that's when you realise that Geoff Keighly is bigger than The Rock and is actually this like absolutely massive dude.
It's like the Tom Cruise effect. Like he's just been standing on apple boxes his whole career and he's actually 5'7".
Yeah, that would have been hilarious.
Imagine how wide he'd look. He'd look like the stockiest mother. He'd look like a chode in human form.
He would look. That would be really strange, wouldn't it? He would. He would be wider than he was tall.
Yeah,
which
exactly.
Would be weird. Very strange. Then Outriders popped up quickly to show off some World Slayer, which is DLC, which is coming out at the end of the month. Outriders have been putting in a lot of work, to be fair to that game. They're often touting new stuff that's coming out, new events and things. Something that I really need to get back into is Outriders. I don't know if it's going to happen, but hey.
Hey, mate, if you swing over to PC and this DLC somehow gets added to Game Pass as well, then maybe I'll join you. Otherwise, might just admire it from a safe distance, which isn't a slight on Outriders. Outriders is fine.
One thing I think we will be going back to, though, I think we both said it at the time, is Fall Guys, because Fall Guys is going free to play later this month. And I haven't looked at that game in like 2 years, and I'm interested to see where it's at. New stuff that's going on, any new stupid costumes that are available.
Yeah. It's funny.
Featured a lot of streamers as well.
Yeah, they did feature some streamers. There was Saikuno and Valkyrie and Courage JD and all kinds of all the brand friendly faces that show up at things like these. All the 100 Thieves.
Pokimane wasn't there. Maybe they couldn't afford it.
No, she's not brand friendly enough anymore. She did content with XQC, so now she's on the blacklist. No, I don't know. I'm joking. Yeah, it was one of those things where, like, the irony about Fall Guys is I remember when we were playing it that summer 2 years ago, back in the good old days, early on in the pandemic when life still seemed like it would be fine for indefinitely. And we kept talking about how, like, oh yeah, this is fun. There's a bit of repetition though, and sometimes you get the same opening level, or sometimes you get that honeycomb thing at the final stage, and like, oh, when they've got 10 times as many stages and it's all rotated and you never see the same thing twice, this will be crazy. And they kind of, it feels like they've been doing more or less that over the course of 2 years, and we've just ignored them. And I kind of feel guilty for that. I feel like I owe it to Fall Guys to go back and have a honest to goodness multiplayer session.
I agree, and especially with it going free to play everywhere, I think there's no excuse to not jump in and play some of that game. It's one of those. It is still fun to play. Like, it is a very fun game. So yeah, why the hell not?
Why the hell?
We then, it was time for some ex-Blizzard employees who are now called Frost Giant Studios to reveal an RTS that they're making called Stormgate, which was kind of a weird little cinematic that they played. But yeah, what was your take?
Yeah, weird because it mixed a lot of genres that you don't usually see mixed together. It was kind of like, this sci-fi kind of setting, and the woman in question appeared to be like an archaeologist of some kind that had like a Destiny-style ghost that was helping them get this kind of weird, old-school-looking, almost medieval-looking shield, but that clearly had some kind of artifact or talisman that kind of gave it some kind of otherworldly capabilities. And then they were attacked by a weird monster that looked like Diablo from Diablo. It just looked like a big, like, weird devil creature that again looked right out of like a fantasy setting, like the Balrog, except with a bit more skin. And then they were saved by a mech, and it was just a weird mashup of looks and feels. But fundamentally, like we said at the time, like, we're talking about former Blizzard employees, people who worked on StarCraft and Warcraft and so on and so forth, coming together to make an RTS. It is going to be free to play, but again, until we know exactly how that's going to play out, it's not worth getting upset over. I'd be interested to know what Chris has to say about this. He was, on top of things when Frost Giant were first announced. He's got a lot of love for Warcraft particularly. I wonder if this gets the seal of approval from him. I hope so.
And they did mention the fact that it'll be free to play, but it won't have NFTs, which they obviously want to sort of try and stop anyone speculating.
How depressing is it that that's where we've arrived? Like,
don't worry. No NFTs. NFTs seem to have died on their ass anyway recently. They just seem... no one's talking about NFTs anymore. Like, no one's got any money for one, so maybe that's part of the reason, but yeah.
Apart from when they get stolen, that's the only time they make headlines.
Right, that is, yes. Then people aren't that happy. Or even the stolen in the sense that I saw one the other day that someone paid, I think it was $50,000 for an NFT and it's now worth 50p.
Jesus Christ. I couldn't live with that. I couldn't live with myself. Like... Do you know what one of the stupidest things I did lately, but I couldn't help myself because of that morbid curiosity, is when that...
You bought an NFT for 50 grand.
No, I wish I had the money to be that kind of morbidly curious. No, this was... I'm not going to say more insidious, but it felt weird. It felt voyeuristic in an unpleasant way. But there was that cryptocurrency that maybe about a month or so completely crashed. I know, like one UK content creator called KSI... lost £4 million or something like that. It just went from crazy number to crazy high to crazy low overnight. And I was like, I'm going to go on the subreddit. Because I remember looking at the subreddit for things like Dogecoin or whatever, or what was it called? Shiba Coin or Shiba Inu, whatever it was. And just being perplexed at these people who were so endlessly optimistic and convinced that they'd invest in the right thing and convinced that they were going to be millionaires and all they needed were diamond hands, and if they waited it out then their life savings and the 10 grand they put into this would one day turn to 10 million. And because they hadn't really been rocked that hard, they were sticking with that optimism. So it was like, what does a subreddit look like when people have lost everything? And the answer is really depressing. And it almost read like a weird self-help subreddit, like people just saying the post titles being like, I've just lost every cent I've ever earned in my life and I don't know what to do with myself. People having to, this is a dramatic term for the podcast, so I apologize, but literally it became the top comment on every post was talking people down from killing themselves. It was crazy. Wow. It's just one of those moments where I was like, I'm glad I never got hooked by any of this because I couldn't imagine that feeling.
It's interesting because I was just trying to think then. For example, where when you spend real world money on stuff, where the value kind of goes and shifts, and it goes from your pocket into Mr. Big's pocket who owns a company and da da da. Is there always someone who profits off the back of a crypto, or does the value just go? No one wants it anymore, and no one's buying it, no one can sell it, and so it just drops off the face of the earth. But that money just literally evaporates.
I think it happens in a number of different ways. There are definitely situations where there have been, rug pulls or people with some kind of malicious intent have taken large sums of money out of a coin, and so its value has just dropped to nothing. That's definitely happened. In the case of this currency, I don't know. I doubt it was that because I believe the creator and the guy who was the face of the coin was still out there and talking about its ability to bounce back and how this wasn't the end of the world. So I don't really know what caused this, but yeah, I'd imagine it's a number of different factors. Really rough stuff. And I guess that's where it kind of it enters that weird grey area of it's funny to laugh at this shit, but then also sometimes you just gotta feel sorry for people. And not in a nasty, condescending way, in I hope everything works out kind of way.
Well, I'm sure for some of those people, Jamie, it might have felt like the end of the world. But it may also feel like the end of the world if they play High Water, because it is a post-apocalyptic adventure strategy game from Demagogue Studios, with a very pleasing art style, I will say. It's very nicely drawn, has some lovely sort of saturated colours, but not overly done. I thought this might look like a Jamie game, but you don't seem to think so.
I didn't see that
too
many.
Depressing.
Yeah, I was saying that I do want to shed a tear every time I play a Jamie game, but I like to shed a tear over, personal moments shared between characters. And it's not so just High Water won't have those, but it was a little bit more I think I said it was too dystopian at the time was the wording I used.
Yes, that was exactly what you said, too dystopian.
Which could be used to describe even, life at present at times, but yeah.
Yeah, well, I can't remember what they even said. Is it like an adventure?
I mean,
think what it would have
adventure strategy game is, I think, they're kind of the boilerplate, but then there wasn't that much that could be gleaned from that trailer alone as to how that might actually play out.
No, not much at all. As we said earlier, there was going to be a trailer for Replaced in the show, but Geoff Keighly did reference the fact that because of the conflict within Ukraine, that there was no trailer, but hopefully we'll see that at some point, because Replaced is one that I was really looking forward to and was hoping to see something for.
I guess you could say that slot in the show was replaced. Do you get it? Because that's the name of the game.
I do get it. But we didn't get to see that. We did get to see something else that was very cool, because American, geez, I can't even say it, American Arcadia, which was an indie game that sort of showcased an almost Truman Show-esque story where it seems like an average guy is stuck in a, I guess, supposed to be utopia, but then it's not everything that it seems, and he has to maybe escape the environment he's in, and he's getting help from the outside world. We were treated to a trailer for that, and it looked like a very interesting sort of like mystery adventure game where you're going to have to solve what the hell is going on, who the bad people are who are after you, and how the hell you get out of there. It looked very cool. Looks like definitely like something I'd like to play. When at first I thought this looked really weird and crap.
Yes, well, that when you see that art style and that name, you're like, where's this going? Although I'll be honest, Jonesy, I'm far more interested not in the game, but in you pronouncing it American every time you say the word American for the rest of your life. Ladies and gentlemen, American Arcadia. But yeah, no, the reference I remember making at the time was We Happy Few, not necessarily because there are that many sort of like parallel lines that could be like, or lines that could be drawn when it comes to the actual look and aesthetic. The aesthetic is very different here, but We Happy Few was that kind of idea of like, oh, here's a very idyllic setting and it quickly becomes clear that not all is as it seems. And that appears to be the case in this, which, that's always a very intriguing premise for an adventure game. And, this kind of looked like it had that sort of like inside kind of like 3D but to like side-scrolling adventure game kind of aesthetic, and I'm sure there's some fun to be had in that.
Yes, and it's definitely like one where you start off and everything's rosy and then gradually descends into some sort of depressing hellscape by the end. But
yes,
I'm all in for that, because it's not when you can see it from the side aspect, it's not quite as terrifying. It's just when it's like third person.
Ooh, sometimes it's even prettier. Like the Artful Escape, like that kind of thing. Like you can do wonderful things with a side-scrolling game if you set your mind to it.
What a quality game that was. You spotted this. I was very impressed with your recollections because Goat Simulator 3, I said that right, it is called Goat Simulator 3, is going to be coming out, and they showcased it with a cinematic trailer which was done in the style of the Dead Island 2 trailer, where the dad is running along the beach and you have sort of like the undead and ripping people apart, and people aren't, and he doesn't notice until sort of right at the end, and I think they start trying to like grab at him. But this was sort of goats causing havoc behind a guy sort of happily running along the promenade. I have never played Goat Simulator, and I do feel like I'm missing out. And this did make me want to play Goat Simulator 3.
Yes, which is great, because like the amount of double takes I did during this, because I was like, well, hang on a second, like this is a trailer for something new. It's riffing on Dead Island 2, which in itself is like a bizarrely deep cut. I don't know how many people out there that are still around and still watching. Like, I'm sure there are plenty of people that recognized it immediately, but it's still like it's an odd choice. And but then I was like, well, Dead Island 2 is still a thing. Surely they haven't, revised the art style this drastically. Surely it can't look like this. And then
it's a mobile game.
Right, exactly. And then it was all of a sudden it was a Goat Simulator game. Then I thought I'd completely forgotten that Goat Simulator 2 existed. Then I found out the joke was, so this was a real head fuck of a trailer, but I'm all for it. Like, I feel like I've had my fill when it comes to goats doing dumb shit and ragdoll physics being applied as a result of the dumb shit that you do, but if they have cool ideas for like how they can take that stuff to the next level, then more power to them. And this was a fun trailer. I laughed out loud during this trailer when I realized what was going on. So that's something, right?
Yeah, it was a very good trailer. I think it did exactly what it wanted to do, which was good. A trailer which wasn't so good, and I'll say only because they needed to show more of the game and how impressive it's going to be, was Marvel's Midnight Suns, which was we just got treated to another cinematic trailer where they showed off more Marvel characters being evil and more Marvel characters being not evil. So.
I'm going to disagree because this actually ticked 2 of the 3 boxes on Jamie's checklist for a good video, and that is Metallica and the Marvel character Blade.
There you go. Blade and Metallica equals good trailer.
Yeah, exactly. It didn't tick the 3rd box, but it's difficult. I get it. It's the internet. Like,
see, it prominently featured Venom, which is usually something which would tick a box for me. But because I was surprised, I wasn't that enamored with how Midnight Suns looked the last time we got to see something, and apparently a lot of other people weren't either. And so I think they had to do a little bit more to sort of show this game off.
Yeah, Sorry.
I was going to say they've just kind of not done that. What I would say from this.
I think,
but then maybe that's because they're making it better behind the scenes.
Yeah, like my feeling is like the smoke on the streets for this one was that people were really excited when it was announced that Firaxis were making a game with Marvel characters, and then we got that gameplay demo and we got a bit of a look at how they're actually making this game work, and there was like a card system, and people weren't super hot on it because the idea of a Marvel XCOM sounds amazing, and then when you find out that it's actually not that XCOM-y, people are like, I'm less hyped for this. And so the vibe I got was that they kind of went back to the drawing board a little bit, not necessarily on the game itself. I think there was always a certain amount of confidence in the product, but at least how they were presenting it and how they were communicating with players with regards to what was going on. I see this as kind of like the reintroduction trailer. Like, hey, remember Marvel's Midnight Suns? Here it is. Here are a bunch of the characters we've got, and it's out in 4 months. I would be very surprised if we don't see this again by the end of summer with some kind of extended look at gameplay and kind of a different angle on sort of what was missing the last time we saw it.
Yes. No, which is fair. So maybe I'm just being a little bit mean to them. But then we got to see something which I am much more excited about, which is Cuphead, the Delicious Last Course. Difficult to say. Which is coming out at the end of the month, which is DLC for Cuphead. But I think some people have already said that this, may feel a bit more like, almost like a semi-sequel, depending on how much new content you get. There's a new character as well, isn't there? Miss Chalice?
Yes, it's something like that. I forget her name exactly, but yeah.
Is Cuphead, Mugman, and Miss Chalice? So there you go.
That makes sense.
Getting a full complement of people in there. We got to see a little bit of boss fight where I think it was Miss Chalice was fighting the Snowflake, some sort of snowy thing.
Oh, that person from the internet.
Yeah, the person from the internet.
Yeah,
it was a snowflake and a fridge, I think, if I remember rightly.
Yeah.
But again, that game looks fantastic. Cuphead always does, and they've obviously been hard at work drawing those amazing illustrations and creating some more intolerable levels of Cuphead where you're just going to die repetitively again and again and again, but the whole time thinking, my God, this is an attractive game that looks like a cartoon.
Damn, like, I don't really want to be doing this boss for the 15th time, but I need to do this boss for the 15th time in order to keep looking at this video game, and that's what I want to do right now.
I want to look at the next level, but to do that, I've got to kill this goddamn fridge and this stupid snowflake, so yeah, go. Cuphead's awesome, though. Go play Cuphead.
Cuphead is awesome. I almost came out with a really hot, spicy take about Cuphead for a second there.
Go on.
I don't know whether or not to do it. Okay. There is a part of me that thinks that for as good as Cuphead is and for as much of a winning formula as they found with that first game, that there is a sort of a feeling of somewhat diminishing returns. And the fact that it has been like fucking 4 years or whatever, and we're waiting for DLC for Cuphead, or like we're going to be playing the previous gen version of Cuphead in backwards compatibility mode, like for this brand new DLC that has been in development for 4 years or was announced 2 or 3 years ago. It just kind of seems like I've got so much admiration for this game's look and its style, and so much admiration for the clearly immeasurable amount of work that goes into making it possible. But it also just feels like at some point, like you made your piece de resistance. You made Cuphead. Like, did you really need to spend the next 4 years making more Cuphead when it just looks like Cuphead?
I almost think it would have been. I don't know how much more they'd had to have done, but just make the sequel at this point. Like, you know how to make Cuphead. You're going to make more Cuphead. All you have to do is do more drawings. You've already introduced another character. Just wait another year.
Right.
Make it a full game.
Like what a Cuphead, at this point, a Cuphead 2 is a 2026 game, like, based on these standards.
Which is so odd. I mean, the problem Cuphead has is because I think because of how simple it looks, or how retro I should say it looks, and how they've nailed the gameplay loop, you'd think that it would just be a matter of just designing new levels and designing new bosses, and it can't be that difficult, and just get someone to draw the pictures. But I guess that the way that they make it just takes a hell of a long time to make.
Yeah. Another equally kind of like short-sighted a take, because I know it's never as one-to-one as this that I've got, is that like when I look at a team that can make something as remarkable as Cuphead was and still is, there's also going to be that voice in my head that says, what else can they do? And when they make more Cuphead, we don't get an answer to that question. And don't get me wrong, I know it's never as simple as that, but yeah, it's still one of those things.
See, it's funny because I don't go that route with them, because I almost think like, if your skill set is this kind of art and this kind of gameplay,
but what if they applied that kind of art to something completely different, like a completely different genre and a completely new set of characters? And I don't know
if it would work. Maybe it would.
It doesn't have to be a 2D platformer shooter. Like it could be anything.
I think it does. I think it does have to be a 2D platformer. No, okay. Of course.
What if it was a 2D beat 'em up?
Oh, that would be weird.
See, I've just blown your mind.
Again, 2D. Everything's got to be 2D. If it's a 2D, like mystery adventure game where you've got to like walk around and solve stuff, a Sam and Max game. If they went and made a really cool, like old school Sam and Max game,
or like with a Paper Mario style kind of like big elaborate scenes and
All right, you've got me.
Exploration.
They should be doing other stuff as well. Maybe that's why they've only done the DLC in 4 years, because they're working on something else. Next up, we got to see some Neon White, which is going to be coming out next week on PC and on Switch, which is the kind of weird runner shooter where you use cards and you don't even have the illustrations and animations of the weapons. You just have like a reticle on screen. This for me is a really unknown quantity. It could be wicked to play, and it looks like it might be a lot of fun, but I don't know if I can get past the fact that they've gone, let's just get rid of the pretense of having weapons. Let's just have a reticle.
Yeah.
Which is weird. Yeah. It's a HUD. It's just a HUD. It's just a camera and a HUD.
It is really bizarre. For me, it's this total conflict between loving the kind of the overall aesthetic, not really digging that one design choice or style choice that you just expressed, also kind of being cool and down for the kind of the level speedrunny based design that I hope would have like a Hotline Miami style, really fast restart, everything moving quickly, like million miles per hour style gameplay that could be awesome. But at the same time, like, what if that's frustrating, and if it doesn't feel quite like how you'd like it to, then that's a real miss. And also, like, this is the new game from, I mean, there's a whole team around him now, but Ben Esposito, who made one of the games that has divided you and I the most in our time working together, which is Donut County.
Oh,
and like, how do you go? Yeah, how do you go from Donut County to this? I kind of don't know, but it's fascinating.
One game's a big hole. Maybe the second one will be as well.
Donut County's a great game. Donut County's a very, very good video game.
We'll have to wait and see. One that I think we are in agreement about, though, is Midnight Fight Express, which was in development by one dude in Poland.
God.
And he has branched out a little bit. He's got a few other people to help now, I think, just to finish the game off. But it is this fighting... I don't even know. Like what it looks like a one man's adventure through a city where he's got to beat the crap out of everyone, shoot stuff, break stuff, find stuff, do shit, and it's got a very pleasing sort of like. Is it isometric? I don't think it is. I can't even remember from like having looked at it.
Kind of like
it's got a very pleasing art style. It's a bit Hotline Miami. It's a bit. Oh God, I don't even know. It's fucking cool, is what it is.
Yeah, the game I keep thinking of every time I see this is My Friend Pedro, and I think My Friend Pedro was a totally fine like 7 out of 10 game, but like the thing that the stronger components within that 7 were the fact that the cool shit that we saw in those trailers did mostly translate well into cool shit to play. And I think if Midnight Fight Express nails that part of things, like if the melee combat looks as fun and as fluid as it does in these trailers, and then as far as I'm concerned, all the other wacky nonsense that's going on could be even middling. And as long as it's kind of got that feel, then I'm down to give this a go.
Yeah, it's being published by Humble Games, and it will be on Game Pass as well when it gets released. And it is out on August 23rd, so we don't even have to wait that long for it, which is pretty sick. Then the game that never dies, it is Warframe. which is dropping some DLC. Duviri Paradox, I can't even say it, which is coming out. I don't even know. I haven't got a date. Yes, but Warframe's coming out, and they are doing a number of drops, I think, on Twitch and things over the next coming weeks. So if you are into Warframe, make sure you stick around for some of those streams because you can check out. We're not doing them on Twitch.
So yeah, someone has to be into Warframe.
Go find them, find the Twitch drops, and you'll get like a hat, a hood, a scarf, maybe a bag.
No, in Warframe, the Warframes are the equipable things. Like Warframes, like different, like weird suits that they wear. I think. So you actually,
I thought they were like I thought like mechs.
No, they're like a weird race of aliens, and you physically put on a different Warframe. I think physically equip a different Warframe.
If you couldn't tell, I've never played Warframe. But if you're into it, you're into it. So yeah, then we had next the team behind Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, which was very anime, but hey, that's nothing to criticize. Just because I know nothing about anime at all. It looked wicked. The art, looks fantastic from an art perspective, as you would expect from an anime game. I'm not really sure what else is going on here, to be honest.
No, and they also showed Zenless Zone Zero. It all seemed to be part of the same kind of segment, and I think it's all from the same team. And it was
I think it's
I should know because I've played Genshin Impact and I've seen that logo, but I can never remember. It's something quirky. I remember. But I was watching this whole segment. I was like, "There's pretty things going on here," and certainly the combat in the Zenless Zone Zero portion of the demonstration looked like really tight and had some great effects going on that looked weighty. And I'm sure, given that this is the crew behind Genshin Impact, that there will be good things to be found here. But I do sometimes, especially 2/3 of the way through a Geoff Keighly 2-hour masterclass, there is one of those things where you're lagging a little bit, and then the anime kicks in. You're just like, all right, come on. There's going to be a big finisher. Just stay with this. And this was kind of that part of the show for me, with no disrespect intended whatsoever to this pair of titles or any of the other titles coming up. But this was the dip for me in Summer Game Fest. This and maybe the next 4 or 5 titles were the dip.
I think that's fair, but then at the same time, I suppose it's good to have a dip sometimes to give you a bit of a lull so you can get excited again. So yeah. I will say, Zenless Zone Zero, I agree. The combat for that looked fluid, fast, phenomenal. I think it was Hoiverse is the company that are dropping both of those titles. But next up, from amazing combat to even more amazing combat, because we had Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles Shredder's Revenge, which touted some 6-player sort of mass brawling between the Bebop Rocksteady, the Foot Clan, lots of side-scrolling Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle fighting.
This is you all over, mate.
It looked wicked. Come on, it looked really good.
It's coming out next week. It's on Game Pass.
Casey Jones.
It literally, I feel like it couldn't have ticked more boxes for you.
Yeah, this is my childhood in a video game. We've been through this so many times. I'm not even going to try it. I'm not going to say it's not. I'm going to hop on that as soon as it gets to Game Pass.
Oh, yeah.
It's been a few years, I think, they've been talking about this game for, so it's about bloody time it came out.
Is there online multiplayer? Because if there is, I might just jump in. I'll be like Donatello or whoever. I'll be the least popular turtle. I've already established that I don't know.
Not be Donatello.
Is he cool?
He's my guy.
I don't know anything about any of these dudes. So
Raphael is cool. Leonardo leads. Raphael is cool. Donatello does machines. Michelangelo's one cool dude.
These are the worst catchphrases I've ever heard in my life.
There must be online multiplayer because it is across. How would you play locally on Game Pass if it's got 6 players?
Get the multi-tap out. 6 PS2 controllers. Come on, Jonesy, get with the times.
Multi-tap.
That was what it was called, amazing. Right? The multi-tap.
Yeah. No, it was. It was.
6-player online and local multiplayer. So yes.
Oh, mate, we're all over it. There we go. Yeah. We can play. It'll be good. Super People was a very strange game that we're going to gloss over because I've got no idea what the hell was going on. There was lots of Britishness and shooting. Yeah.
They threw a 10p coin on the table.
It's PUBG and it's a bit, I guess, Fortnite-y in some ways. They've tried to add a bit of that Fortnite funk.
I think it's like PUBG with maybe some Overwatch funk as well. Like, I think different characters have skills, but at the same time, like, you're playing PUBG. Yeah.
Yeah. Then Humankind is coming to consoles. So quickly moving on. One Piece Odyssey is a brand new RPG inspired by the anime One Piece. We streamed it once, actually. Another One Piece game with the stretchy pirate boy. Luffy, what's his name?
Luffy? There are some people like getting really annoyed at us right now for not knowing, but at least we're in the ballpark, right? Like, we get brownie points for that, surely.
Hopefully. This was a reasonably sizable trailer actually for an anime style game, but it was we didn't actually see much gameplay. So if you're into One Piece, get excited because you've got a new One Piece game coming out that you can play. Then we had a bit of Soul Hackers 2.
Sorry, I'm caught up on trying to make a one. I thought I had a One Piece joke ready, and then I got hung up on like trying to make it before you moved on. I ran out of time. Yeah,
I'm so sorry.
No, it was like I was gonna say something really fun, like I haven't gone on a One Piece Odyssey since I last bought a cake. Then I was like, I can workshop this. This can be better. There is room for improvement here.
I just skated too quickly over One Piece.
Yeah, and then I was like, well, how many cake jokes can I make about soul hackers? None.
Soul Hackers, of course, if you didn't know, because I would have no idea, is another anime game. Soul Hackers 2. So get excited for that. Then Metal Hellsinger was one a bit weird. I'm just going to say, Jamie, this was a bit of a weird one, wasn't it? And I'm going to be crap at it. I can tell you that now.
Yeah, so there was an indie game from a few years ago that used the exact same concept, which is like, hey, what if you had to play a first-person shooter to the beat, kind of like Crypt of the Necro Dancer? And this is kind of taking that in a bunch of different directions. Firstly, by obviously taking a lot of inspiration from the recent Doom games, and then by applying it to the appropriately satanic music genre of metal, and roping in a lot of famous faces and names from the world of metal music along the way, like Serge Tankian's involved in some way. I guess for me, the reason that this is a bit of a middling game, based on my just early feelings on it and watching these trailers and a few gameplay snippets that were released a couple of weeks ago, is because one, again, like without sounding harsh, and I know we're talking about different studios, different budgets, but the gameplay does look a little bit just like a low rent Doom, and it's like there's more Doom out there that I haven't played. Like, you got to really make a case for me, and the case it made for me was this rhythmic action that is all driven by metal music. And like I said to you at the time, metal music for me is really hit or miss, and there are a lot of metal acts and artists and songs and albums out there that I genuinely have liked over the years, but there is that also kind of like really middle ground generic metal that I thought like was present in this trailer. Again, I hope, apologies to anyone who thinks that's me firing shots, but like there was nothing about the music that they used in this trailer that made me go, oh my god, I like, this is the perfect combination of ideas. It just felt a bit weird.
Do you really want to get screamed at by some middling metal?
Like, I'll get screamed at by Serge Tankian, but the person in the trailer, like, maybe not.
Yeah, it was a bit of an interesting, weird one. I like the idea, I like the concept, but I suppose we'll have to see how it actually works in execution. But then I think this was probably the end of the bit of a dip, and then we got back to some games which are a little bit more exciting. Well, it depends, I suppose, how you feel about the next one, because The Quarry, which is out tomorrow, which is very much in the style of
Until Dawn, Supermassive Games.
Until Dawn, thank you. Which is a actor cast led story horror. Will They Survive the Night? Kind of title, which, like I said, is coming out tomorrow. But it did have an all-star cast, and we sort of were spotting as we were going along with the different people that we recognised who were going in it, because the character models are also very good. I'll give you a few of the people who are in it if you want. David Arquette, from Courtney Cox fame.
That's harsh.
From
Eight-Legged Freaks, bro. Come on.
Eight-Legged Freaks, and also Scream, of course. That's the one I was trying to think of. He plays Officer Dewey. I think his name's Officer Dewey in Scream.
I don't know. I've never seen a Scream film. Shock.
What?
I know.
Even the first one.
Even the first one.
Skylar Gisondo, who is he's in the Santa Clarita Diet, which is actually very good. If you haven't seen it, maybe check that out. He's also in the Amazing Spider-Man. Ted Raimi is in it. Halston Sage, Brenda Song, Zach Tinker, Ariel Winter, Evan of Agora, and Lance Henriksen. Now I'm bored, so I'm going to stop giving you.
See, it's one of those lists, and people who've seen any promotional material for the Quarry or are going to play the Quarry will know this already. They just sound like a list of names that you don't recognize, and then you go and play the game, or you just watch one of these trailers, and you're like, oh, wasn't that person that character in this film? And the answer's probably yes. Like, oh, wasn't that person the girlfriend of the guy from The Social Network? Like, yeah. And like, oh, wasn't that guy the dude from Detective Pikachu? And like, yeah. It was. It's all of these people.
All of these people. They're, I guess you call it, well, they're often secondary characters. I guess that's the thing, right?
Yeah. Like they did it with in Until Dawn, where like that was a it had Until Dawn, for example, had like a very early role for Rami Malek. Like not many people remember that, and also had the chick from Heroes. I always forget her name. She married the boxer.
Hayden Panettiere?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, like it was that kind of casting.
Thank you very much. Then I'm going to try and I won't rattle through them because we need to talk about them, but I will try not to linger too much. We then had the Saints Row character creator, the boss. What do they even call it?
It's not Builder Boss. That's still on the nose.
I think you might be right.
Is it?
Come on, Saints Row. They love on the nose. What are you on about?
No, it's Boss Factory.
Boss Factory. You can download Boss Factory now, so you can design your boss character. I think they were a little bit worried after the reaction that some people had to the first trailer, where people were worried that you were going to be forced to play as a certain character, or you're going to be forced to do it a certain way, and they're sort of allaying those fears by going, no, build your boss now. The game's not even out. Download it. Build the boss. Have fun. You can be whoever the hell you want.
Yeah. Please forget that we chose a female woman of color for all our promotional materials, and create your own boss now.
Yes, it was almost like the V thing with Cyberpunk. Everyone was like, "What is? I can choose V. I thought V was a girl," and they're like, "Wow." Or no, V was a guy, and then they were like, "No, you can be a girl V. You can be this V. You can be that V. Be the boss you want to be." That's what Saints Row are trying to tell you.
The ironic thing is about a bunch of those games that have given you the choice but have picked women for the promotional materials is being the woman is usually the best version of those games. Like Assassin's Creed Odyssey was 100% one of those, where I can't even remember the dude's name in that game, but he was a fucking doofus.
I'm trying to think. I can't remember his name either. They were twins, weren't they?
Yeah. Alexios and Cassandra.
That was it. I was Alexios. Of course, I had to be.
Alexios was he was just a bit dense. That's all.
Alexios.
Yeah, but then you like big dense men. I know that about you. That's why you hang out with me.
That's true. Talking of big dense men, Warhammer 40,000 Dark Tide looked epic.
It did look good. I was glad to see some like gameplay snippets, and boy, did that look crunchy and impactful, and like I wanted to kill those things.
We're talking multiplayer, we're talking online, we're talking making a team with your mates, going and destroying waves and waves of enemies that attack you in the style of Warhammer 40k, and it looked wicked. And the character models look great. There was one of the ones that stood out to me was that one of the characters on your team is this massive troll dude looking thing, and he's just smashing people left and right with a giant mallet. Obviously you've got different classes of characters, and you're going to have to go and perform missions in all different areas and then get run over by huge hordes of enemies. And it looks sick. It looked wicked. And I've been excited for that game since I first saw it. And I couldn't remember that it was that game until Jamie reminded me. So there you go. And I think we already said, didn't we, that we're going to have to hop on and play some of that when it drops.
Absolutely. I think that's a Game Pass one. So again,
I'll try and check.
I feel like it is, because I think that they did some kind of deal with Xbox, which is why it was an Xbox showcase to begin with, and I think they've got console exclusivity. So we'll see how that pans out. But yeah, there were reminiscent of lots of different things here. Like you said, lots of Left 4 Dead, some GTFO, some. We actually ended up even bringing up Deep Rock Galactic while we were watching that trailer for one. Like, yeah, it was rad.
Yes, Game Pass.
There you go. There's money in my fucking pocket.
Then we had some the game, which is hard to say, Layers of Fears, because Bloober Team still want to scare the absolute living crap out of you, which is coming out in late 2023. Not late 2023, I think I made that up, which is coming out in 2023. More. So if you liked Layer of Fear, then you'll love Layers of Fear.
No, I think it was Layers of Fear. I think
Layers of Fear?
I think it's Layers.
I think it was
I think it was Layers of Fear, Layers of Fear 2, Layers of Fears. It's a bizarre progression. But you know what, they're sticking.
No, you're right.
It
It was Layers of Fear, and now it's Layers of Fears.
Yeah. Exactly. But again, I love that Layers of Fears isn't even a sequel to Layers of Fear, because there was Layers of Fear 2. So they established that they were willing to go the numbering route. Now they're going the S route, which I guess worked for Aliens, but I don't know how well it's going to work here. I've enjoyed Bloober Team's previous games, usually in a very short-term capacity, often for streaming. The Blair Witch game they made was again fun for some streaming. Layers of Fear 2, I think Steph and I did that back on ATG. But I understand from more hardcore horror enthusiasts that sometimes Bluebird Team have been a bit hit and miss over, in terms of the actual substance of their games. And I'm curious to see how this pans out. And also especially curious to see Bluebird Team out here promoting a game in the midst of all this Silent Hill chatter that they are allegedly involved with, and yet no sight of anything Silent Hill related.
Indeed.
One State of Play and a Summer Game Fest down, and Silent Hill fans are still blue-ballsed.
They're going to keep it to as late as humanly possible. That's why they're going to just keep it.
Yeah, never.
Never, indeed. Layers of Fears, of course, was one that's on Unreal Engine 5, which I don't think too many of the games tonight were on that. But
true, or at least they're not promoting it as much as Bluebird Team are.
Well, that's true. Yeah, they're not shouting as though that's the one and only thing. Gotham Knights did have a bit of a cheeky little trailer, but it was just some cinematics about Nightwing. We didn't get to see any more gameplay footage of that. But it's. I maybe partly thought it's because of the slightly negative reaction that the gameplay trailer, or not trailer, was it? It was just gameplay footage of Red Hood and Robin, was it? I think it was in that we got to see a little while ago.
I thought it was it not Nightwing as well?
Oh, was it Night? Oh, no, maybe I think you're right. Actually, I think it was.
I don't think we've seen Robin or the chick yet under any real spotlight. I forget who is she? Is she Batgirl?
Batgirl, I think she's Batgirl.
Right, okay, yeah.
Interesting one. We've seen a lot of Gotham Knights up to this point, and then the last thing we saw, was a little bit. I'm not going to say concerning, just a little. Maybe gave a few more questions about how the game is actually going to play, how it's going to feel,
totally,
etc., etc. But there is plenty of space for that game to be bloody brilliant. So I'm not going to be too down on it, even though recently I have been down on it.
Yes, fundamentally, we still want it to be good. We'll just, we'll see what happens.
We didn't really learn anything else, though, did we? It was just a quick cinematic that showed us a bit of Nightwing,
which I think is the safe move, like you said at this stage. Let that gameplay demo cool off, and then see where you're at.
No, absolutely. I think you're right. We then got, I suppose, the creme de la creme, the pièce de la résistance, a cheeky little ending with Neil Druckmann, because he joined Keighly on stage to talk about a few of Naughty Dog-esque things. One of them leaked, unfortunately, just before the show. Which was
bummer. The big finish as well.
PlayStation actually leaked the fact before that they are remaking The Last of Us, which from the ground up, I should say, for the PlayStation 5. But we already knew about it.
Yes, in fact, we were discussing before that you actually thought that it was 100% confirmed and real.
I didn't think. I thought we just hadn't seen it. I didn't realize that the leak was like a leak. I thought it was like you just haven't seen it yet. But no, you reminded me that actually they've never confirmed this, and then PlayStation ruined it right before the show. This
was a long series of kind of not even leaks. It was kind of more reporting. Like a lot of it came out of Jason Schreier and Bloomberg, which again is nowadays a pretty reliable source for this stuff. They were talking about how there was that weird. Do you remember all that story? Again, this is over a year ago, probably at this stage. There was that weird. It was that PlayStation studio that would just help out on various projects and do they were really good at cinematic things, and they would jump on and do and help out with various sequences of various games, and then they were given kind of the green light to do their own game, and they started doing a ground up remake of Uncharted, and they pitched it to PlayStation, and PlayStation were like, no, we're not interested in this, and then they were pivoted onto a ground up remake of The Last of Us because it seemed to make more sense based on what PlayStation wanted and what would fit into their calendar. And then over time, it got taken away from them and got brought back to Naughty Dog because after The Last of Us Part 2, there were a large number of people at Naughty Dog who didn't have anything to do. And so this is essentially what they have been doing ever since. They were called the the PlayStation Digital Arts Agency or something. They had some weird like corporate name like that. It was that whole series of stories that Jason Schreier, I think, broke, or at least reported on, and now here we are. It's real. It's coming out in September, and it's called The Last of Us Part 1 now.
Yes, the addition of the part 1. And one thing I think was funny when we were actually watching it back was because I said at the time, it doesn't even, they've rebuilt it from the ground up for the PlayStation 5, but it doesn't look any different. Like it basically looks the same as I remember it. And they then, as if they could read my mind before I'd even said it, they'd included in the trailer, like this side-by-side comparison to show you how they have actually changed and how different it looks. And I think the problem was it looks more like The Last of Us Part 2. So, and that's obviously the most recent game, especially in my mind. And it is a complete ground-up remake, and it does look very impressive. And I can't wait to see those characters and in that whole game again for the PlayStation 5. And like you said, coming out in September, not very long. Perfect sort of game, I suppose, to pick up before that sort of holiday season goes a bit mental and you can sort of tuck it away. Before the holidays of 2022, why the hell not? But it wasn't just The Last of Us Part 1 remake that Druckmann was there to talk about, because he was also going to talk about the TV show, the HBO the HBO TV show that's getting made at the moment. And Troy Baker and Ashley Johnson joined on stage because they, Jamie, are going to be in the TV show, but we don't know in what capacity.
Yeah. I thought that was, like, you were saying at the time that it made sense. My first reaction to it was like, that's weird. And as someone who knows who they are, that's going to be distracting depending on how big a role they have. I think they also confirmed that they are roles that exist within the game at present. So
Clickers.
Well, yeah, maybe. Actually, that would be a good fun twist, but then, I don't know. Yeah, for me, it will be strange, especially as you made the observation at the time that Ashley Johnson's voice is just Ellie's voice, like pure and simple. Yeah. And so, like, if we're just there and there's a side character with lines of dialogue who's just Ellie, that will be a moment for me where I'm like completely sucked out of that experience and I'm hyper aware of who they are. But other than that, it's a nice gesture, and they're clearly very talented performers. And, you know, if someone can... You have actors like that nowadays that are doing not just vocal performances, but also doing performance capture and giving these unbelievable performances. Why not have that acknowledged in a format that a lot of them don't traditionally get to make the jump to, like prestige television? So more power to them.
No, absolutely. And the reason I've done the little announcements from this way round from Naughty Dog is because by far the most exciting thing that Neil Druckmann was there to talk about, I think, was the fact that the multiplayer portion of The Last of Us Part 2, which was obviously announced before the game was coming out and was then seemingly delayed and was then sort of pushed again because I thought we were going to see it this year, we're apparently not going to hear more about until next year, until 2023. But we had confirmation today that is actually it's been peeled off and is a standalone multiplayer game, which is a lot bigger in scope than anything we'd actually expected when it was going to be attached to The Last of Us Part 2 itself. We got to see some concept art for it, not much else, but it seems to be... they've said as well that it's got its own story, it's got its own characters, it's a lot bigger, so the world's going to be a lot bigger.
It's also, I think, set in a completely different part of America to anywhere that the games are set at the moment.
So which is I think is one of the most exciting things that could have come out of like the whole of today, I think. The whole of the show itself, like this is a really cool thing. Effectively, we're getting a spin-off, really, of The Last of Us, which is pretty wicked.
Yeah, it makes sense. There's a lot of appetite for this. I think Naughty Dog showed with the original Last of Us, and you know this firsthand, having played so much of it, that like they're capable of making a really cool, interesting, and ultimately different to a lot of what's out there multiplayer component that makes sense within the universe that The Last of Us has established. I think yes, we've waited a little bit of time, but rolling it out into its own standalone thing as they have done lets it kind of stand on its own 2 feet, especially if it's like maybe it's free to play, or if they like roll it in with like if it's free as a part of like a Last of Us 2 director's cut, or however they want to make this kind of thing work. We'll find out. I think there's a real opportunity here to make something kind of cool, and I hope they follow through on that.
Can I have a punt?
Yes,
I think it might be some kind of battle royale.
that's totally plausible. I'd like to think that Naughty Dog would do a twist on it rather than just
I think twist. I don't think straight battle royale. But so it's if I think of my experiences with the multiplayer from The Last of Us Part 1, or Last of Us, the sorts of things that you're doing in that environment, it's all about sneaking, not being found by like the other human players, using traps and things to actually distract, injure, or do over those players. And it is about finding resources in the environment. And so it is very much in keeping with what we've grown to expect with battle royale games.
And like a lot of battle royale games have been so focused on the action, the shooting, they haven't had stealth mechanics like The Last of Us has.
No, and I could just imagine, like, because one of the most fun things about The Last of Us multiplayer was you would set a trap for somebody, and then you would hide, and then they would come out, set the trap off, and then you'd pop out and shoot them, and it was, damage was. It was really easy to take damage. It was hard to cause damage, and you could even like melee people and suddenly jump out of somewhere with a bat and just beat the shit out of them. And it was often about not having the resources. You didn't have a gun, you didn't have this, you didn't have that. You had to get close with a pair of scissors and stab them up, and it was tense and it was slow and sort of impactful. But I think if you sort of put that into a battle royale game, you may well have a much more in keeping with the original idea of like battle royale, like the movie. In general, whereby it is gritty and it's harrowing, and you really have to grind and fight to be the final survivor. And there's loads of ways they could put a twist on it, and they could obviously make it. They can make it work, but I guess we'll have to wait until 2023 to find out, Jamie.
All kinds of things happening next year. Very exciting. Also cool just to see like Naughty Dog again, incredibly talented studio. A crazy 2 years have already passed since their last major release, so. The idea that more and more of that team is getting freed up to working on new stuff, and Neil Druckmann confirmed, talking to Geoff today, that he himself is working on a new project. Very excited to see what that all ends up being. Obviously, patience is a virtue at times like this, but yeah, it's always nice to just get auditory confirmation.
It is, no, absolutely is. As well, at this point, I suppose it's a good time to mention that next year we've found out that Summer Games Fest is going to be in person, so it's not just going to be digital.
True,
which should be very exciting because E3 is also coming back in person as well. The ESA have sort of reiterated and have said no, it will return next year.
Yeah.
It's just going to be digital.
Like, ultimately, at the end of the day, as fans and as people who get to watch showcases and press conferences and live streams, hopefully this just means there's more happening, there's more attention, there's more eyeballs. It's a better marketing and promotional opportunity, a better window for companies to release or promote games, or to release trailers or promote games. And that means there's more for us to see, and there's more for us to chat about, and there's people who get to make a podcast about all this nonsense. This is great. But the interesting, like, underlying element to all of this is that E3 are back, physical presence and digital presence. In their absence, Keighley has just gone on to try and claim more and more of that territory for himself, even getting like Sony to play ball with him when Sony, one of the last things they did before E3 disappeared was to remove themselves from it almost entirely.
Right.
Is there going to be a continuation of that collaborative environment we talked about earlier, where everyone just wants to promote games and release trailers and market their products? Or will there be a slightly competitive nature where are the ESA gonna, or is either side gonna get the checkbook out, or like make things more palatable for certain companies to say, hey, like, don't go to E3, come to Summer Games Fest for whatever reason. And like likewise, if they both have in-person events, that means that unless they choose different weeks, in which case everything's fine, but if they're both at the same time, then like there might be two separate venues in different sides of Los Angeles that are both trying to compete for visitors. It's a really weird prospect.
It is weird. It almost gets back to what we were saying earlier on, that Summer Game Fest has made it all feel much more collaborative, whereas next year we could see the complete opposite and it becomes much more combative again because, you started to have people fight about where they're going to be and who they're going to be with and where the reveals are going to come. So it's definitely one to look out for and to keep an eye on for sure.
Yeah. But like either way, like no complaints, because we we can tell from this year the fact that we do still as frequently as we do refer to it as E3 or make the key 3 joke. Like clearly it's synonymous with this time of year, and clearly there is a massive appetite every time June rolls around for these nice structured events where lots of announcements and reveals all get tied up into these nice little packages and then distributed and delivered, hopefully without too big a gaps in between them. And personally, with all due respect to Geoff and everything that he's achieved and all the territory he's claimed for himself over the years, and with all due disrespect to the ESA and some of the weird shit that's come out of there in recent years, like at the end of the day, I like getting excited about games, and whoever and whatever gives me the opportunity to do that is what I'm there for. I like, do you know what, Jonesy? I like sitting at my desk in a Discord call with you, watching a live stream, saying what's going to come next. I don't know that logo. What are they making? Oh my God, they're making, like, I live for those moments. They give me so much joy. So whoever wants to bring them, bring them.
Yeah, no, agreed. Absolutely agreed. Well, we've got about 5 minutes left until we get to the 2-hour mark, and we need to run the 60% eyelid closing test. But let's see if we can rattle through a couple of other news topics before.
If you'd like, I can kind of like take 2 off our list just by sort of piggybacking off the Summer Game Fest discussion, because there are a couple of things that kind of tie into news stories that I was wondering if we might see more of today.
Yes, do it. Let's do it.
One of them I'm just going to bring up quickly because it was an absolute long shot, and if you'd asked me to put money on whether or not it would be at the Summer Game Fest, I'd have said absolutely will not. But the other, I was just going to draw attention to the fact, especially poignant given some of our recent conversations, that we have now had a state of play that has passed, and a clearly PlayStation endorsed and PlayStation an event that PlayStation could have cooperated with in the form of Summer Game Fest, and we have not heard anything about God of War Ragnarok or its potentially impending release date. The news side of this is that in the absence of any firm news, there's been a bunch of different chatter about what's going on. A website called Game Reactor posted a report saying that the 2023 release date, or a slip into 2023, has been confirmed by, quote, various European sources. Jason Schreier took to the internet to said that he's spoken to people who would know firsthand and people who would know secondhand, and he has confirmed that nothing has happened yet, which suggests that, like, while he doesn't want to put money on it, he believes the Game Reactor article to be false because he knows he has spoken to the kind of people who would be their sources, and they have said that is not the case. But we still don't know for sure. I've got to be honest, Jonesy. Yeah, sorry, go on.
No, go on.
I was going to say, like, I really thought that we would. I really felt we needed to see that release date soon for, like, September, October, even November to be possible, and I'm worried.
I've been saying it for weeks. I think you have very good cause to be worried, because I think it's going to come out in 2023 at the earliest. I don't think it's going to make it 2022 at all. But just purely because everything we've seen up to date is so unfinished. In my eyes.
I know. And you're so wrong though.
Okay, and I think we would had to have seen more earlier, let alone by now. And the fact that we still haven't seen anything, and the last thing we had was Corey Barlog saying, hey, it's not ready for you to see it yet. When it's ready, it's ready. And I'm like, wow, if you're not ready to show a trailer, like if you're not ready to put out a gameplay trailer, if you're not ready to show 10 minutes of gameplay at Summer Game Fest or whatever, then I don't see how it jumps on the PR cycle in order for it to be out, like September, October, November. So then you start saying, okay, so it could come out possibly early December. And I'm just like, I mean, come on. And it gets to a weird one, because Jason Schreier for weeks has been saying the same thing. He's been pushed multiple occasions to say whether or not it's coming out this year, and he's not only doubled down, he's tripled down on numerous occasions, saying, no, look, my sources say it is coming out this year, it is coming out this year. He runs a little bit of a risk, I think, because he's got himself quite tangled up with this narrative that it is coming out this year. He's even come out and said, and me as a journalist with my sources, I can pretty much say that, hey, it is coming out this year. And he's then has given himself a little bit of an out by saying, hey, never say never in the games industry, but people are just going to remember that the next time he comes out and says, hey, look, my first-hand sources have said it is coming out this year. If it gets delayed, I think he'll lose some of his credibility.
He probably will, but I don't think he should. I think that's just the kind of the nature of the people who follow games in the games industry, and they don't just want instant gratification, they want instant news, and they want that news to be instantly reliable. And I don't think... And you could argue that this is the responsibility that someone like a Jason Schreier bears by putting himself out there and making these announcements. But the games industry doesn't work that way. And like when Jason Schreier, when I hear Jason Schreier saying, "Hey, I've got a first-hand," someone who would know first. His exact words were, "Someone who would know first-hand and someone who would know second-hand." That to me means I literally know someone like within Sony Santa Monica, or who is working on this game, or is in the marketing department, or someone who works for PlayStation. And then secondhand is like, I know someone who knows someone who blah 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 blah, and I can get to them. The idea that both of those people are saying, hey, at the moment it's still coming out this year, and in July, August, like Sony Santa Monica delay it, totally plausible, if not likely. And the frustrating thing is, what people need to realize is that doesn't make Jason Schreier wrong. He reported on what he reported was accurate. I went to my source. It's due for release in 2022. When it gets delayed, he's going to report that it gets delayed. But like, I don't know what someone like Jason Schreier is meant to do. Say, oh, I know when it's coming out, but I'm not going to say because it might change. Like he has to report.
No, but that's the thing. I don't think he does. I think what he needs to do in this situation is just shut up. Like if he just said, "I don't know, I've not heard,"
but he has heard.
No, but
from a first-hand source.
But he sought out that source to ask them.
Yes, because it's what people want to know, and it's his journalistic responsibility to answer those questions.
Yes, but why has he done it? He's done it because he's heard murmurings that it's been delayed. There's been a slip into 2023, and what he's done is to try and say, "Well, I know I've got sources there, so if that person's, I need to be on the bandwagon as well. I need to know as well, and I'm going to contact my source." His source has said, "No, I've not heard anything." But imagine if you worked at Sony Santa Monica and Barlog's losing his mind because he's so annoyed that something's messing up and is delaying the process. It's quite obvious to some people that it's going to get delayed internally, but it's also quite obvious to some people that that's something you daren't say, because as far as they're concerned, like for example, it could be that they're like, no, we will get it out this year, but some people are like, there's no bloody way it's getting out this year.
It depends on your first-hand sources and like where they are.
It does absolutely depend on that. Like,
and again, like, sorry.
But we have no idea. Like, we don't have no idea who the source is. I just think it's a little bit dangerous for someone like him to repeatedly keep saying, it's coming out this year, it's coming out this year, it's coming out this year.
But he doesn't say that. He says that he reports. No, I'll read the quote. Do you want the quote?
No, I'm talking about his earlier quote. He did a quote last week, I think, or the week before, which was, he basically said, it's coming out in 2022. Everything I've heard says it's coming out 2022.
Yes, exactly.
And then someone said,
that's a fact.
Do you know for definite? And do you know for definite? And then he said, well, you can never be definite. And
yes, exactly.
Oh, so now you're covering your own back.
That is not covering his own back. That is just, that is pure fact. That is pure fact.
Fair enough.
And like, again,
that's true.
you listen to the quote for this one again, because Game Reactor is saying it slipped. He said, it's hard to definitely prove a negative, but someone who would know firsthand just told me they haven't heard anything about a slip to 2023, and someone who might know second, and someone else who might know secondhand. Like, if you read that and it slips, and you think Jason Schreier is like A, a bad journalist, or B, a bad reporter, or C, shouldn't have said what he said, that I think like you like, I don't know what you expect from a journalist.
I don't think he's a bad journalist. I just think in this instance, I think he's seen, every time I hear about Call of Duty, every time I hear about God of War, I immediately hear about Jason Schreier afterwards. It just seems like I'm not quite sure why he's because
he's clearly got a source that other people don't have.
Exactly,
and he's willing to report it.
Exactly. I think that it's just a bit dangerous. You were saying you don't think that he should lose any credibility if it does get delayed.
100% no.
I'm saying,
because he has never reported anything but the fact of the matter.
But what I'm saying is, if in this, no, I'm not. Maybe credibility maybe is the wrong word, but maybe the next time he comes out and says, my first-hand source has said this game isn't getting delayed about another game, everyone should take what he said with a pinch of salt.
I don't think you need to wait till that next time. I think you do it now. He's telling us to take a pinch of salt every single time.
But what I'm saying is the next. So let's say, for example, God of War Ragnarok is delayed to 2023, and let's say August they come out and they announce a delay. The next time, next year, when Jason Schreier's talking about a completely different game, and he says, "My first-hand source said I can't prove a negative. My first-hand source says that it's not getting delayed, and a second-hand source has also says." I think you take that with a pinch of salt.
No, John, I don't need so. I will take it to mean exactly word for word, syllable for syllable, what he said. His first-hand source says it hasn't been delayed yet. His second-hand source says that as well, but it still might be. It means the exact same thing in that situation as it does now. It's not a question of credibility. It's not a question of track record. Factually, they both mean the exact same thing. You're just, for some reason, in this example, you feel more liable to believe him, and you feel like that he's leaving the back door open in case he's wrong. He's not leaving the back door open in case he's wrong. He's leaving the back door open in case something happens that hasn't happened yet.
Right. See, but I from everything we've seen about God of War Ragnarok, I do think it's happened already. Whatever the thing is, I think it has happened.
Then you disagree with a Bloomberg's journalist source within Sony Santa Monica. There you go. Alex Jones of the SuperShow podcast disagrees with Jason Schreier's first-hand source. You heard it here first, folks.
That doesn't mean that. It means that the first-hand. It doesn't mean that. It means the first-hand source that he might be quoting might not be giving him the information that he wants, for one. Or it could mean that the first-hand source he's talking about... That is
such a wild leap in speculation that I don't even know what you're talking about anymore. You're now speculating that Jason Schreier's source that has information on God of War Ragnarok might intentionally be feeding him misinformation.
No, but they might not feel comfortable.
What point are you even making anymore?
There's a weird... Because the problem with like the journalist angle from this is you hear someone like Jason Schreier say, I have a first-hand source and they've said this, and you take it as... Like for you, that's gospel.
No,
because yes, it is.
No,
yes,
okay,
it is. Because
it is.
You've already said that.
Don't misappropriate.
You've already said that. That means at the moment it is coming out this year, and there's nothing wrong with the development.
You're then saying no.
You're then saying
now you're putting words in my mouth.
August it is delayed. That means it was perfectly fine now, but in August something goes wrong.
You're putting words in your mouth because where did something right or wrong with development come into this at all?
The issue that's causing the delay, like we were just saying. Like I said, I think it's already happened.
That's completely fabricated. There's no reference here to issues like good development, bad development, anything like along those lines has been completely like materialized by you in the last 30 seconds.
Whatever the thing that would cause the delay then. It doesn't have to be bad development. It could be whatever it is. Whatever the issue they're having with a technical hiccup or whatever. I don't have no goddamn idea. But for whatever reason... You're saying whatever it has happened that would cause the delay to 2023. You're saying that doesn't exist yet.
No, I'm saying it doesn't exist in such a way where the that it is occurred to this first party source to relay it to Jason Schreier, and therefore cannot be a part of his reporting that he is entirely entitled to do.
Fair enough. I think that maybe he's. I think he will lose some of his credibility, and I don't. And you said you'd think that would be unfair of someone to that. I think.
Yeah, I think honestly, I think if you think less of a journalist's word because
not less of him, not less of his word. That's
if you think his word is less credible, then you're an idiot because he was factually correct entirely throughout.
What?
Because at no point did he get in it. At no point did he get anything wrong. He was reporting on something that hasn't happened yet.
So anything Jason Schreier says is correct, even if it's wrong, because at the time when he said it, you didn't know if it was true. Therefore, he can say that he was right at the time. So he can say whatever he wants, as long as you can't prove that at the time he said it, that he knew he was wrong.
No, because it comes down to the way he words it, which is, again, I'll read the quote.
The first part is really important because when you said the first part, you can't prove a negative.
Someone who would know firsthand just told me they haven't heard anything about a slip to 2023. It is upon the reader, or in this case the listener, of that sentence to divulge the information that they want from it. And if you leap to that being 2022 confirmed, 2023 delay not going to happen, if 2023 delay happens, Jason Schreier's credibility goes down, that is on you. Because again, he said, someone who would know firsthand just told me they haven't heard anything about a slip. If you think credibility has gone down, it is because you have taken interpreted it in far too matter-of-fact a way. Jason Schreier's reported that his first-hand source hasn't heard about a slip. If a slip happened, Jason Schreier's credibility does not go down.
But but in a way, he is attacking the credibility of the source that have said there has been a slip to 2023 directly. He's saying, if there was a slip, my first-hand source would know about it. They've said there is no slip, therefore he's saying there is no slip.
He has he's cast doubt on another report.
So he is saying the other journalist who said it has slipped to 2023 is either lying or they're wrong for whatever reason, because he said this person would know. They've said no.
Whether or not this matters, I don't know. He hasn't done it in official capacity. This was a forum thread he just commented on. He hasn't written about it or reported.
No, that doesn't. To me, that makes no difference. It's his work. He's not like he. It's not like he's representing a journal.
I'm just saying he hasn't decided to write a Bloomberg article saying Game Reactor are wrong and here's why. Just making that clear.
I don't think that matters. Personally, I don't think that matters. So then what I'm saying is if now the game is delayed to 2023, it would be a very strange position whereby he can say Game Reactor were wrong, I was right, even though they were right in the substance, because at the time when I reported it or the time when I said it, my source was right. He's basically saying they got lucky and I was right.
No, because he says it's definitely hard to prove a negative.
But it's impossible to prove a negative.
Well, yeah.
But that's one of the things you say when someone says, you basically saying someone is wrong, is you say it's impossible to prove a negative.
Yeah, but that's, again, it's him
so he's
saying,
doubled down. He's attacking their credibility twice. He's saying they're wrong, but I can't prove they're wrong because they're wrong, and you can't prove a negative. And my person who would know says it's not happening.
I think that it's these weirdly like hyper literal interpretations of these statements that it's becoming too black and white.
No, I think when it gets pushed to 2023, I think his credibility will take a little bit of a hit. Not his credit, not in general. I'm not saying like people should never believe Jason Schreier's reporting anymore. I think he's very important in the industry, and I think he does a lot of good work. But it will take a bit of a hit, and I think it probably should.
I disagree. Completely disagree.
I know. Wow, we talked about that a lot longer than I intended. But,
do you know what else is going to take longer than intended? I just want to get this off my chest.
What?
Waiting to see Hideo Kojima's next game. Because I'll be honest, Jonesy, I wasn't going to spoil this for you before we went live or while we were live.
I'm glad you didn't, because if it had been announced, I would have been annoyed if you just spoiled it.
Yes, I genuinely thought we were seeing Hideo Kojima's next game today, or at least something from Hideo Kojima, because basically for anyone that missed it, the internet kind of had a mini blow-up midweek this past week, as it appeared as though Hideo Kojima's latest project, or our project to Hideo Kojima at least, in some form or fashion, was leaking. Reliable insider Tom Henderson claimed that he had received early footage from the game, which apparently stars Margaret Qualley, who was Mama in Death Stranding. It seems to be some kind of a third-person horror title. They described that seeing a woman walk through a corridor and there are ghostly apparitions and there are jump scares, and at the end there's a big game over screen and it says the name of the game, which is a supposedly Overdose, and it says
PT2.
Game Over on screen. Well, there are a lot of PT connections and there are a lot of Silent Hill collections. There's this weird thing where once this all started leaking, a logo for the game supposedly leaked. Again, take all this with a big pinch of salt. That logo included the symbol of an upside down triangle with 3 circles inside it, which people have pointed out is the same as the Save logo from the Silent Hill series. So it's is Kojima
oh god.
So basically a lot of this stuff was starting up, and there was basically a very strange kind of element to this where And this is where you get into super dumb, weird
Do you reckon this is damage
stuff.
Control?
I don't know. At this stage, I do not know what it is.
What might be interesting, maybe they did this on purpose because of the leak from Norman Reedus about Death Stranding 2. And so they've effectively mocked something up that can be leaked as well. That kind of makes people say, oh, it's not Death Stranding 2, it's Overdose, so that Kojima can get his hand back on the tiller when it comes to, announcements, releases, etc. Maybe, do you think, or is that far too far-fetched?
I think it's a little bit far-fetched. I think sometimes there are fantasies and hypotheticals that people like to apply to Kojima that extend far beyond what he actually has a track record for doing. He likes a little bit of trickery and bullshittery, and I think that... But this is still strange. I don't know how this fits into the bigger situation, because, is Norman Reedus actually doing Death Stranding 2, or did he misspeak? Are they doing Death Stranding 2 because Kojima's moving on and this Overdose thing is nearly done? Is this Overdose thing the Xbox project that Jeff Grubb has been talking about for ages? Like, is this anything to do with Silent Hill? Like, there are so many questions. One of the things that compounds the issue, I will just say, again, more weirdness from the world of insiders and rumor mongers on Twitter. A new Twitter profile reared its head just over a week ago at this stage, but no one noticed him at first. It was an account made in May, and the screen name for the account is The Snitch. They follow 6 people on Twitter. They include Nibble, Shinobi602, Tom Henderson, Daniel Ahmad, Jeff Grubb, and Hassan Karaman.
No,
their banner.
They follow Hassan Karaman.
They do.
That's amazing.
Their banner on Twitter is the abandoned real-time experience only for PS5 image. Okay, at the moment they sound like a joke. They've got 15,000 followers, and they have only tweeted 3 times. Do you want to know what those tweets are?
Yes.
On the 2nd of June, which it was about 12 hours before the State of Play aired, they tweeted out an image alongside the tweet, hashtag State of Play @Nibellion. The image was an exact list with his name inside the image and his handle on Twitter, and a list of all the games that would appear in the State of Play, and he got everything basically 100% right. He got, he said Final Fantasy 16 Summer 2023, Tunic, he got the date right, Street Fighter 6, Rollerdrome date right, Eternites date right, Callisto Protocol date right, Stray date right, Marvel Spider-Man Remastered coming to PC. He didn't get any misses, there were nothing on there that didn't show up, blah, 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 blah. This also isn't one of those things that we had for a few months ago where there was a fake leaker who tweeted out the names of a bunch of different games, deleted the ones that were wrong after this Nintendo Direct had happened. So this is all in one image, Clever. And it was tweeted out before the State of Play has been altered. Then, 4 days later, on the 6th of June, this is before the logo leaked, he tweeted out the word overdose with an emoji of an upside-down triangle. That's before the logo leaked. And then this is the additional weird one that started all the speculation. 2 days ago, Jonesy, he tweeted out Part 1, 02/09/2022, then a gamepad/PC. What got announced tonight? The Last of Us Part 1 releasing on the 2nd of September for PlayStation 5 with a PC version confirmed to be in development. So the Snitch has tweeted 3 times. He correctly predicted The Last of Us Part 1's reveal and release date, an entire State of Play before it happened. The only missing link is the word overdose, which corresponds to a report by Tom Henderson, who claims to have seen footage and doesn't seem like he'd risk his reputation for no reason, and a logo that leaked that also matches an emoji put by the Snitch. But we didn't see anything today. How fucking crazy is that?
That's so good.
And also, why does he follow Hassan and have the abandoned banner image as his banner? Like, I'm sure it's a joke, but it's also very annoying.
It's great.
What a fucking mess. And like, there's something about like I said, I genuinely believe what I said, where like, I think a lot of the Kojima stuff is smoke and mirrors, and people make more nonsense about him and make up more rumors and like misinformation about him than actually exists. I think he's weirdly straight and narrow. Like he's done some bullshit in the past, like Moby Dick Studios and the Metal Gear Solid 2 bait and switch. But like, generally speaking, a lot more of it is put on him than he generates himself. And the fact that this is an extension of that, and now there's this mysterious Hideo Kojima project that has a trailer in the wild that journalists have seen and the Snitch knows about, and that it didn't show up today at the Keighleys, like, poor. It's my kind of bullshit, Jonesy. It's my kind of bullshit.
To be fair to him, he didn't say it would be today.
No,
Summer Game Fest. So the Snitch with the overdose and the thing, so it could be revealed, like you said, at the Xbox showcase.
The Snitch has not revealed anything with regards to. Well, there was one thing that implied it. Geoff Keighly tweeted out, "There's nothing like the feeling of seeing a good world premiere arrive in your inbox." And the Snitch replied to him. This is technically his like 4th tweet if you count it. He says, "It's a game over." And the words words game and over are capitalized, which matches up with Tom Henderson's report that the trailer ends with the character dying and the words "Game Over" appearing on screen, followed by the logo for Overdose. So again, there's more corroboration there between Tom Henderson and the Snitch. I feel so weird just calling someone the Snitch. Yeah. It's also
cool,
also worth noting that when he originally tweeted out the state of play and tagged Nebellion, no one noticed. Like he tweeted out the entire state of play and no one realized until after the fact. And then someone discovered it and was like, "What the fuck? Who is this guy?"
It must be so tempting if you're an insider and you have a load of info. It must be tempting for clout to know that you can go onto Twitter and get loads of followers, and no one's going to know it's you.
Yeah, he's a completely anonymous account who's averaging 5,000 followers a tweet. In video game rumors.
It must be so tempting. Or do you know what's funny? It's probably like the husband or wife of someone who's really high up who knows loads of stuff, and they're like, "Oh, I never get any likes online," and they're like, "Do you know what? Let me try this," and suddenly they're going to be like,
it could also totally be like you could tell me this was like Tom Henderson creating an alt like fake Twitter account to tweet stuff that he knows about but journalistically can't report on. But if he knows if an insider tweets about it anonymously, then he can report on the tweet. Like if he told me this was one of those schemes, I totally believe you.
"Oh,
but we'll
that's
see."
so interesting. That's dodgy, but anything. But yeah, really.
Yeah, you can't report on the news, but you can report about someone tweeting about the news. But yeah, it's very strange. I also haven't seen, for whatever reason, I haven't seen any of the big dogs go out of their way to corroborate it. I've heard people like Jeff Grubb and I forget there's a guy who Andy something from VGC. I've heard them both like reference it as the Kojima news, but I haven't seen anyone like go out of their way to find a source on this, corroborate it, find out where and when it might turn up. Schreier as well. Like I'm not sure. Schreier follows the Snitch. He started following him really early on. But I haven't seen.
So here's a question: if the Snitch tweeted that God of War Ragnarok had been delayed till 2023,
I would be heavily inclined to believe it. Honestly, at this rate,
even if Jason Schreier said that he had a first-hand source who said it's not happening.
Yes. It would because Schreier is like a very careful journalist, and what Schreier will do is what we've talked about before. He will have sources, he will have ways that he's vetted those sources, and every time there's a piece of information, he will go and get a report from the person X and get a report from person Y, and if possible, person Z. And yeah, if they all match up, then he has reason to believe that something is happening, and if you have a reason enough to believe that something is happening, then he can write about it.
It must be infuriating to be like a mainstream kind of journalist and to not be able to talk about leaks and things until you get some sort of confirmation. And then you see people on Twitter who have no whatever, but for some reason they found something and then they're eating your lunch because they can just put whatever they want.
You kind of have to be careful. And it must be weird, like having to adhere to it. And I know people love to rip into games journalists and call them this, that, and the other, and especially Jason Schreier. They have weird reps nowadays, but like a lot of them are honest to goodness journalists. They study journalism. They obey by the practices. They do what they're supposed to. And we've commented in the past that it is so funny that there are influencers and content creators out there who take brand deals and can be bought out or paid off left, right, and center that have better reputations and are more trusted than legitimate journalists because the term games journalist became a sullied term at some point in the last few years because a few too many snowflakes or fucking weirdos made shitty articles for Kotaku and ruined games journalists' reputations across the internet. And don't get me wrong, a lot of those Kotaku articles from the last couple of years have been absolutely atrocious, disastrously bad. And
we probably threw the net too wide, including who are classed as journalists underneath the net.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's part of the problem.
Some fucking mental feminist wants to write some mad shit on Kotaku. It's not the same kettle as fish as some of these other dudes who. It's a messy subject, and I probably have already said something stupid, and I'm gonna get a randy comment down below. But yeah.
Well, quickly before we finish up, let me really quickly hit you with a little bit of news close to my heart because
of course.
We were a little bit worried earlier in the week because some pre-orders were delisted and even refunded for the Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake, which was supposed to originally be coming out in 2021, then got bumped to 2022. It has now been indefinitely delayed, and is Ubisoft have actually said it is no longer targeting a financial year 2023 release for Prince of Persia Sands of Time remake. That doesn't necessarily mean it won't come out in 2023. It just means that they don't know necessarily when, and it's not going to be coming out. I think it's before March of 2023. This is following a pretty rocky development. It was a ground-up remake, in case you didn't know. It was originally being handled by Ubisoft Mumbai and Unisoft Prune, I think they're called.
Pune. Pune. Is it Pune?
Sorry, Pune. Who have done a lot more sort of mobile game stuff and have done Prince of Persia mobile games in the past, but it has now been taken away from them and has been given to Ubisoft Montreal. It's gone back home, if you like, as we've covered before and we've been talked about. But it has not been cancelled. It's not been got rid of completely, as there was sort of speculation earlier in the week. But it has been indefinitely delayed. So my little face is sad.
Mine's sad too, but for different reasons.
Okay.
Mine's sad that it wasn't actually cancelled outright, because that would have been the smart thing to do here.
That would have been horrendous. It needs to be good, the first one, because I want the entire trilogy to be remade.
That's what I love about this the most, is you have a lot of passion for that era of Prince of Persia and like seeing more of projects like this come to light, but that actually, like, a lot of your nostalgia doesn't actually lie within the Sands of Time. It's like Warrior Within and the Two Thrones.
Yeah, Sands of Time was good, but it wasn't anything on the other two.
He wasn't enough of an emo yet.
It was nowhere near enough of an emo. He was happy still.
He needed at least 4 more layers of eyeshadow before he peaked.
He did. He needed Godsmack to really ram it home.
Hell yeah.
There you go. But
what do you think even happens with this? Like,
I think so. For me, like, I think this is pretty straightforward. I'm gonna completely now bullshit and make up a load of bollocks. What happened was
just cite your sources. Someone, what was the wording? Someone who would know firsthand, and someone who might know secondhand.
Yeah. I think it seems pretty obvious that what happened was Ubisoft thought that they could turn a quick buck by remaking a beloved franchise, the first one, and it would be, Square Enix have done it with Resident Evil, etc., and it's worked quite well. So they were like, hey, let's go back and remake some of these older games. We'll give it off to a cheaper development studio that have done some good work for us in the past, in the shape of Ubisoft Pune and Mumbai, who are, I think, more aligned with sort of quality control and things in general, but they do have a development team in-house, but that's not the main thrust of like what they do. But because they've done some good work with the mobile games and some remakes for mobile, they thought, oh, they can handle this remake for this game, completely ignoring the fact that you effectively need to build a completely brand new AAA game for consoles, which is insane to give it to someone who's so untested. They've then looked at the stuff they've then given them more time to fix it and make better, and to maybe hire the right people. They've then realised this is unsalvageable. They've taken it back to Ubisoft Montreal and they've started the entire process again. And I think the people in Montreal have said there is no point even trying to start on what they've made. That maybe they've helped in maybe some things they've done wrong have helped, and they've said we know not what to not do because this sort of stuff didn't work. But we need to start the entire process again, back to the drawing board. Let's start again, start afresh, make something we're really going to be proud of. Because that trailer they put out was dog shit. Let's not beat around the bush.
Yeah.
So
no, you're right.
There you go.
And like, again, like you mentioned the Resident Evil remakes, and there are tons of other examples too. And although it's a far more recent game, the Last of Us remake could end up being another example of it. Like, if you just like do right by these games and build them from the ground up on modern tech, like, it can do wonderful things to how these games look and how these games play. And yeah, it would be a shame if that was not the treatment that a series like Prince of Persia got. And so I hope that in some respects, as depressing as the story is, I kind of hope you're right. And I hope that means that, I don't even know, Q1 2024, we're talking about a nice, new, polished Prince of Persia. Although I will say up front, and I've got to warn you this ahead of time, if that doesn't happen and if you're wrong, your credibility will go down drastically.
Do you know what? But that won't happen because I have no credibility, so it can't go down. I'm at none.
You're less than zero.
Yeah, what does negative credibility mean? I don't know.
It's like it's a reverse psychology thing. So the more negative you go, it's like if you say something's not going to happen, it means it's more likely that it will happen.
So the opposite of what I say is taken to be true.
Yeah, exactly. And
that's just lack of credibility.
The lower your credibility gets, the more true the opposite of what you're saying becomes.
Oh, no, yeah, no, I think you're right there. So if I say something, not only is it unlikely to be true, it actually makes the likelihood of it happening less.
Yes, exactly.
Wow.
And each time that happens, technically you're wrong, so your credibility goes further, and so the relationship becomes more inversely proportional.
Until everything you say means that the opposite will happen.
Yes, exactly. And so people are begging you, saying, please say God of War's going to get delayed, please.
Exactly, yeah. I see, do you know one thing I will say off the back of this? I hope that Ubisoft, Pune and Mumbai don't take it too much to heart. I think they've obviously done a lot of good work, and it seems like they were just given too big a task, more than they could handle.
Yes,
and I don't think people should I don't think it's their fault. I don't think at some point someone has high up in Ubisoft, maybe even Eve, thought, "Hey, we can do this on the cheap," and they shouldn't have tried to do that.
Do you remember that exactly when that happened last year, where Rockstar threw the job of making the GTA Definitive Editions to Grove Street Games, who had previously just made mobile ports, and they were like, take the mobile ports and make them for like the PlayStation 5 and the Xbox Series X. Like, these developments are complicated. I think sometimes it's easier to see them as theoretically being cheaper and easier than they potentially are, and I can see why there were studios who made mistakes in their estimations for how long things will take, how much it will cost, and how hard it will be. And these studios have probably suffered. And yeah, you're right. Like, you can't compound the issue by like slagging off an entire studio of probably very talented people.
Ironically as well, because almost there's a sense of thinking like, oh, they're not that talented enough to do this. But you probably find that if you gave Ubisoft Montreal the task of making an Android or an iOS port of an old game, you probably find that they wouldn't be able to do that because that's not in their skill set. Just because they're the more expensive development team doesn't mean necessarily they're going to be best for every time you need them to do something. But anyway, with that insanely long podcast, right off the back of doing a very long recording for Summer Game Fest, all that's left for me to say is thank you so much, Jamie, for joining me for both of those things. As I said earlier in the show, you can check out our Patreon. The $5 tier will have access to the watch-along that Jamie and I did just before we recorded this. That should already be live when this podcast is up. So go over, check it out. Or if you'd like, you can check out our Discord and you can get on there for $2. We are patreon.com/SuperShow.
Do you want to know something mad? You just mentioned the watch-along. If you add it all up, we have been sat opposite each other, staring each other in the eye, talking about video games for 6 hours.
Oh my goodness! No wonder my face feels like this.
Yeah.
The lights are just killing me. Thanks so much for everybody for watching. Thank you for supporting. Thank you if you just leave a comment or you could subscribe or do any of those amazing things. It keeps us going. It keeps us coming back. Thank you to our patrons. You are incredible. You are part of the, I was going to say ATG, not ATG, Super Show family. Thank you for keeping our dream alive. We will see you next time. Bye.